Sometimes it does that. Little sneaky intro. The XSplit is set for that to restart. Should we do a clean one? Let's do a clean. All right.
Sometimes it does
if you're watching
that.
on YouTube, it's not going to be clean.
Intro.
If you're doing the audio later,
The XSplit
keep
is
it
set
clean.
for that
Okay,
to
XSplit,
restart.
start from the beginning.
Should we do a clean one? Let's do a clean. All right. Sometimes it does
If you're watching
that.
on YouTube, it's not going to be clean.
Intro.
If you're doing the audio later, keep it
set
clean.
for that
Okay,
to
XSplit, start from the beginning.
Should we do a clean one? Let's do a clean. All right.
There we go.
If you're watching on YouTube, it's not going to be
Double
clean.
echo.
If you're doing the audio later.
Oh, is it playing on my PC?
Okay, XSplit, start from the beginning.
Double echo.
Let's do a clean. All right.
There we go.
If you're watching on YouTube, it's not going to be
Double.
clean.
What do you say? What do you say we go for triple echo? What do you say we go for take 3? Third time's a charm? Are we echoing anymore? Fixed. All right, third time's a charm. Here we go. We did for realsies this time. It's not easy doing a show by yourself. Cup of Jones starts for the third time right now. If you're just listening on the audio, hopefully it is the first time. Hey everybody. Happy Tuesday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever it is in your corner of the world. This is your Cup of Jones for Tuesday, May 22nd. May 22nd, cheers. Excuse me. It was like a third and a half time, sure. I wish I had a halftime for Cup of Jones. We go straight through, and we actually only have 11 pages of questions today, which is impressive considering that I missed a week. So hi everybody, we haven't been live for 2 weeks. I was at Judges Week last week, going and playing a bunch of fun games. Some of them we have talked about. We did I sat down with Mr. Brad Ellis. We talked about Call of Duty Black Ops 4, that reveal event that some of you might have seen live with us, but got to sit down and play it for a little bit, so you can see my gameplay and my impressions from actually getting my hands on Black Ops 4. Brad Ellis, Ben Moore, and Michael Damiani talked about Kingdom Hearts from the reveal event that we had last week. And before he got married, Michael Huber and I sat down and talked about Days Gone, almost immediately following the PlayStation event, where I also got hands-on with Dreams. And that embargo was lifted yesterday, and I've just been doing too much stuff this week, so I haven't had time to grab somebody, sit them down, and talk about how much fun I had playing Dreams. Am I going to be absent again for the E3 stream? No, we'll get into that later. I will be more present this year for E3. Yeah, Judges Week was fun. I had 3 specific questions for Judges Week, so I thought I would just lump them all into an editorial this week, because I didn't really have anything planned for an editorial. So talk a little bit more about how Judges Week works and why they have it, and what it means for the world of gaming to have a week for judges. Want to say thanks. There was a lot of good vibes from last week's editorial. Some people had some criticisms before we move on to personal questions. Had a concern about a comment that was made previously on Cup of Jones, and so I made an editorial about it. And some people legitimately had some concerns about how I approached that, and so I definitely want to address that as well. But thank you to everybody. Actually, I went through, I think it was like the most non-question comments for like a recent episode of Cup of Jones. I think there were like 130 something comments, and a lot of them were just like a thumbs up. So thumbs up back to you. Thank you so much for the positive support and good vibes. And apologies because there were so many comments. If I missed any of the specific questions for this week, apologies. It was tough going through and reading like, a 3-paragraph thing and being like, there's no question in there. Okay, great. And then I would favorite that and or give a reply. And so let's talk business. Before we get into the feedback for business, this is I have been offline with the commenter in question, but we'll get into that later. This is a big week. I've said that a lot recently. There have been big weeks, but if you are not filled in, if you're just a recent patron of Easy Allies, almost a month ago, we had a special stream called Better Stuff Before E3, where we were hoping, fingers crossed, to get just over $10,000 to buy 3 new cameras and a switcher so that we could improve the visual style of everything that we do. So this camera right here, the main camera that we use for the podcast for all of our shows for Cup of Jones, would improve, and we would also get 2 new cameras and a switcher, so we would be able to do multi-camera stuff. although we have some people that don't want that, for all of our shows, just generally increase the production quality. And we blew way past that goal, ended up getting over $30,000, and we spent all of it. And so we have some of that equipment still coming in. If you follow us on Twitter, you can see the official post. I should have grabbed that graph that Ian put up, but if you just go to twitter.com/EasyAllies, you can see the shopping list that Ian put together in purchasing all that stuff. There's still some items that we are waiting on, but we have a lot of it. And we are going to unpack it starting Thursday. So tonight, the way Tuesdays go, I do Cup of Jones in the morning, and then we usually shoot some stuff in the afternoon. Today we're going to be shooting tabletop, and then everybody gathers at 6 p.m. Pacific time for our 2-hour group stream that we do, and then after that stream, we shoot our podcast, along with any extra stuff. That's where I think I'll grab somebody for Dreams and sit down and talk about Dreams, and then Dreams, the PlayStation 4 exclusive video game, and then after that, I will cut the podcast and then get a little bit of sleep and then get up and rip this garage apart. Basically unplug everything, every console, every mixer, every HDMI splitter, everything that's USB plugged into the PC, and take the couch out, take the desk out, clear off my desk over here. Just kind of, I'm gonna take all of... Thank you very much, LEGO Dimension Figures. You're all going into Ziploc bags and going into a big storage bin. That closet in the back there, I'm going to have somebody come in this week and remodel that closet so we have easier access to the shelf space that's in there, because stuff right now is kind of stacked up. We are not going to do an unboxing stream, but we will be recording the process of setting all of this stuff up, so you'll be able to see that at a later point. But that means that there may be a little shuffling this week with shoots. I don't think anything will be adversely affected, but some of the allies wait until the end of the month to shoot their stuff. Fiasconauts is a great example. Not sure exactly. We're probably going to shoot Fiasconauts next week. And this week is the Q&A this Saturday. So it'll be an interesting week. Hopefully we can, I can take care of all my stuff on Wednesday, and then Ian's coming Thursday. Hopefully we can set up all of the stuff on Thursday and be done, but we might have to have that carry over to Friday as well. So I won't be streaming at all this week. Apologies. I'd love to get back to finishing up the Disney Castle or something like that, but I will be building and plugging and cabling, and it's going to be interesting. So look forward to that. Hopefully next week's Easy Allies podcast and next week's Cup of Jones look better than ever. My first episode of Trailer Jones went up. We hit our 44K goal, and we're way above that now, so it looks like we will have a Trailer Jones next month, an E3 special Trailer Jones. Go check that out. It's on our main channel. Welcoming any and all feedback. We had a lot of people, because we used to do Trailer Jones trailer specific, so one episode would just be one trailer. Had a lot of comments from people that said they like it to be more robust. They love it when we talked about multiple trailers in one episode. So we did that for the new format. Of course, we got many comments on YouTube saying that they would like the opposite, and so you can never please everybody. One person on Patreon very specifically said he didn't like the new intro. I have a new logo and a new jingle that Amanda and her friends recorded that I very much enjoy. But so I might be tweaking that, might be getting custom lower thirds from that, might be making a little mortise that when we do picture-in-picture, the video stays in on screen. Might put like curtains around that or something. So might jazz that up, but check out that first episode and let me know what you think. And next month, if we carry over and we're still above the 44K goal, we will very likely do a post E3 Trailer Jones wrap up, maybe like an extended episode where we look at like 4 or 5 trailers and officially grade some of the best trailers to come out of E3. Although we will probably also be giving see, the difference is between Trailer Jones and Trailer Awards. If we give an award for best trailer for E3, that's an award that all 9 allies vote on. If we're going to score a trailer, obviously whoever is on camera is the one scoring those trailers, and so that'll be the official score. So even though Easy Allies gives something the best trailer award of E3, that might not be the best scored trailer on Trailer Jones, which is how that works. I have no idea what we're streaming tonight. There's been lots of chat lately in our Slack about all sorts of stuff, and if something was discussed, what game we were streaming, I don't know. If Bloodworth is in chat this morning, maybe he can bring you up to speed. Maybe I will grab a Kleenex before we actually get into business feedback. But I don't know. I don't know what we're streaming. Maybe people can let me know. Feedback for business. Here we go, everybody. Oh, I also haven't shaved today. Do not adjust your television I am sleepy and have not shaved. All right. Combo Breaker was wondering if we get an Easy Allies E3 trailer hype fest this year. Last year's was really enjoyable to be a part of. I'm also curious if you're expecting to see a lot of The Last of Us Part 2 at E3. Yeah, Last of Us Part 2 I think is going to have a big presence at E3 this year. I can't guarantee an Easy Allies E3 trailer hype fest. I think that was suggested and then voted on by our community for us to stream on a group stream. So I think that is up to Kyle Bossman and our community. So I don't know. Beard of Jones. Not quite the beard. I'm not going Greg Miller on this, but so I don't know. I don't have an answer for you, Combo Breaker. I do not know. Sorry. David Purcell, have you considered outsourcing the new EZA and Frametrap logos to a contest design amongst your fans? The reward could be a year at the highest tier or something similar. Yes, I have long considered. I'll tell you this: if we update the Easy Allies and Frametrap logos, because I talked about that a little bit last week, we'll update everything. It's not just going to be like we're improving one or two logos. That would be. I'd want to redo the tabletop reaction shots. I'd want to basically get a new logo for every single show that we do. That could possibly be a new tier on Patreon, or that could be a new goal that we set up for ourselves one day financially to get some money and then invest in somebody. I know we have a lot of people that would be very much willing to do that just by themselves. That would we have had requests from people, submissions from people that are like, I don't want to be financially compensated. I just want to make Easy Allies look better, and it can be kind of sticky. You know, we've had those we've had many requests in the past, more than we've actually interacted with our fans when it comes to people submitting stuff. Again, we've worked with the fabulous Chris LaRue recently on Mortis's and new graphics. We're actually working with him for some specific E3 stuff to make our E3 footage look better than it has before. But yeah, that's definitely something that I would like to not guarantee to you, the viewer, but to suggest to the rest of the allies. I know Kyle Bossman, probably more than any of the allies, is very excited about that, about updating our logos. So, no, we wouldn't consider doing a contest. I don't want to have a bunch of people put in a lot of hard work and then not have that hard work, realized, make a bunch of fancy logos and then we just kind of, throw those away. I would want to work with somebody who knew their work was actually going to be. But that might be somebody from our community. That might be somebody that we outsource. I do not know. Not yet. Not something certainly before E3 that we are planning. Rennie, I worry about you guys. I get nervous every time you use footage taken in your backyard, in an ally's neighborhood, or when one of you shares seemingly innocuous personal information, like what kind of car you drive, what restaurants are close to your homes. You're all very smart guys, so I know you try to be careful, but I worry that you may shrug off the risk of sharing a small personal detail here and there, not realizing what all those details could add up to. Rennie, your statement is true and false. Like, we do drop a little personal information every now and then. But we do not shrug off the risk of sharing small personal details. As much as I love... Somebody asked a very specific question about Michael Huber later in this episode. I love Huber. Huber every now and then will drop little tidbits where I'm like, Huber, can you not please mention that restaurant that you frequent that's close? Yeah, so we talk about that stuff sometimes. Ever since we've got new insurance, ever since we got the new equipment, we have a new security system set up here in the garage. I live in a very big neighborhood, so it is a little bit of a needle in a haystack. But at the same time, if you were to do your detective work, possibly you could track us down. Rennie brought up the fact that at Easy Living last year we had somebody deliver us pizzas, which was a very generous offer, very kind gesture, but also very creepy, because we would like our privacy, and you can access us right here. Look at this, I'm here, you were live. I'm taking questions right now. Hoglaw, new security system, love it. Mark Van Dyken says Sophie will protect, so don't worry about that. We got Sophie's got our back. No, Amanda is absolutely infatuated with our new security system. It has lots of multiple layers. It has an app that we're gonna get the allies on so they can adjust that stuff. So you can pick what corner of the house you want to do, and it'll alert us while we're away from the house. So yeah, there's only so much you can do because we are here. I mean, even if we were back at Viacom or Defy, there's only really so much we could do there. As far as we were definitely much more vocal and obvious about where we were and how you could get a hold of us. So, but all the more reason to incentivize all of you to get us up to that studio goal, so we can hopefully not give any clues as to where that is. Parasite Paladin, you talked about top 10s as a far-off goal last resort type deal. Now that it is on the table and seems to be even helping, what is the next last resort? Could it happen to be first 15, or are the discussions for first 15 still ongoing? They're definitely still ongoing. We haven't had any new discussions since then. Again, we have our big meeting at the beginning of the month, and then it's just kind of a bunch of Slack chatter after that until we get to the next big meeting. And then the next big meeting, either at the end of May or at the beginning of June, will very much likely just be all E3, going through the E3 graphics and looking at the new equipment, and just bought a couple of things yesterday that I'm excited about that aren't necessarily on our list, that aren't a part of that $30K budget that we're already budgeted outside for E3 expenses, stuff that we wanted, but just a way we can change up the visual style of how we've done the past couple of years, as far as just what's going on there behind the camera. So I'm excited about that stuff delivering and seeing that. Bodyguard stretch goal, yeah. We'll get the Punisher to stay here and get more dogs, more Sophies, just multiply Sophies. Have them on patrol in the back there. It'd be great if my house was like a Tenchu level, where there's just like dudes with katanas, like, nice night, walking around. Like, that'd be cool. Yeah, and I'm just like drinking sake, like in my in my bedroom. You gotta get in there, sneak in. Yeah, so we haven't talked about first 15, the new shows or any new tiers and stuff like that. That is a conversation that needs to pick up immediately once all of the E3 hullabaloo is gone. Yeah, I think it would be probably more sketch type stuff, more stuff that would fit more toward. We actually have a request coming up. About doing something kind of Funny Games Daily-esque, doing a show that we do maybe 2 or 3 times a week live in the morning. And I think if we have some of us right now, some of us get paid a little bit extra to put in, have a little bit more responsibility to cover more of the things that make Easy Allies tick. And now we. I think one of those things moving forward, if we were to get a studio, would be people that need to show up at that studio every day of the week, or if we're shooting anything, people that need to be here. Now that we're going to have a new mixer switcher set up, Ian has kindly offered his services to stick around for the Easy Allies podcast, which means whenever we're doing the Easy Allies podcast, he will always be here, and he will always be on the microphone. I don't know if that means he'll be on his own team for voting or how that's going to work, but we'll figure that out later. Dante's Igloo, what is your favorite game and movie trailer of all time? Personally, I love the first Infinity War trailer, and Star Wars The Old Republic, The Attack on the Jedi Temple. That was a good one. Or the Overwatch reveal trailer. The Overwatch reveal trailer is really, really, really good. Overwatch might be up there. My easy answer, just without thinking about it too much, is still when we did our top 100 trailers at Game Trailers, was the BioShock reveal trailer, where you start and you're going over the corals, and he says Rapture, and you see Rapture for the first time, and then the whale comes swimming in, and then you go through Rapture, and then you go in the back of the head of the protagonist. Didn't have a name at the time, and then that guy pulls a little sister out, and then tries to attack her, and then the Big Daddy comes up and he fights the Big Daddy, and I just think it's really good. I talk about a lot when we do Trailer Jones, whenever I score trailers or dissect trailers, talk about. I don't know if there's like a rule book for how to make good trailers, but I just think the reason why I like the BioShock reveal so much is that it hits a lot of the notes that I continually bring up, where it's like, it's CG, but it's very truthful to the experience of BioShock. I don't think it tries to come across as being like, this isn't gameplay. It clearly is not, but it is like suggesting what the game looks like. And that actual area that trailer takes place is in the game. It doesn't look exactly like that, but so they didn't just dream up some weirdo section of Rapture to have that take place in. Like, you can actually go and go by that corner. I did a Trailer Academy on it if you want to go see that back in the day. Search Trailer Academy BioShock. And it's just creepy. They use music actually from the game. They used Armin Shimmerman, I think is his name, the guy who voiced what's his butt? I can't remember the character's name from BioShock, but they actually got him, and so to have a voice actor that early in development, I thought was very impressive. This is a very personal question. I don't know why I'm answering it in the business. I'm still getting rusty at swapping the business and personal stuff. I was very cocky about how good I said I was going to be at that, but well, it's Trailer Jones is up, so maybe this is business related. And my favorite movie trailer of all time is the second trailer for GoldenEye, the Pierce Brosnan film, not the video game, not the Nintendo 64 game. The teaser for that, I think, just had him walking, and then he shot the way 007 until, or he shot a word away or something until it shaped and said 007. And then the actual second trailer, the big reveal trailer for GoldenEye, is very well edited and very fun, very over the top. Was Amanda in there? Armin Shimmerman, thank you. Armin Shimmerman. Andrew Ryan is also the character's name. Yeah, Amanda knows that because Amanda's a big Buffy fan, and Armin Shimmerman was on Buffy. She's also a big Star Trek fan, and he was on Deep Space Nine. He was actually on Next Generation as well, but primarily, I can't think of his name. He was a Ferengi on Deep Space Nine. I actually watched a lot more Deep Space Nine than Amanda did. Really fond of the Fantastic Beasts 2 trailer at present, says Hoglaw. Nice. All right. Enough talking with my wife, who's right over there. Eric Mitchell, what do you think about shooting an episode of the podcast, or anything really, with whatever cameras are used to shoot VR videos? Whatever cameras. You know, those VR cameras. You got a couple of those lying around, right? I think it would be a blast to get a chance to feel like I'm in the garage with you guys for an episode. I will put that as a takeaway. Why not? I love that. A VR podcast. Wait. I'll put it right at the end there. VR podcast. I like it. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, Eric. That is also obviously very expensive. We'd have to rent that or steal that from somebody. Matthias. Mattias. Matthias. I don't know if I'm going to remember that one, but I will try to drill it in there. Disclaimer. I have made content on YouTube and Twitch for about 6 to 7 years, so I'm very cautious about complaining about stuff, since I do not want to throw people under the bus. But I figured if I combine the criticism with the way to solve the problem, it should be fine. We'll see how it goes. So I hope this is all good. I recently listened to, at the moment of writing this, the latest episode of Frame Trap and the Easy A podcast back to back. Damiani was in both of the episodes, and while he is making completely valid points, it is hard to listen to him because he seems so disorganized in expressing them. There's so many like and end stuff in his speech pattern that for the first time distracted me while listening to the shows. It's one of those things that cannot be unheard, so in advance, sorry to anybody that won't be unable to not hear it from now on. If you think that it would be worth spending some money to have the allies take classes, do you think it would be worth spending some money to have allies take classes under a speech or acting coach? I know this is what some other show hosts are doing to refine the way they express themselves. In my opinion, this would really help, since a lot of your content is audio-based. Sure, it's tricky because I think there's lots of strengths and weaknesses. I think we all have speech patterns. I say a lot more than I would like. I just shot a couple videos with Brad Ellis. I think Brad Ellis says, and stuff like that, I think. There's something that he says. Bloodworth has the butta. I don't know if you know Bloodworth's butta. So he'll make a really good point, but, and then he'll say the next thing. Kyle will go like that. We all have our weird things. Huber and Ian both scream directly into the microphone. So, we all have ways that we can improve ourselves. I think we have kind of rested on naturally getting better at that. A lot of my camera skills just happened because I have been doing this for a very long time, and so I have developed that stuff. So I think some of us are better at doing that. I think there are some things Damiani does on camera better than any of us. I think a lot of times when Damiani gets on camera, a lot of times when he's doing stuff during group streams, he has a very deliberate bit that he's trying to do. He prepares a lot. He puts a lot of practical jokes and a lot of silly stuff together. And obviously he is much more focused on getting better off camera. So he's improved our group streams a lot. He's done a lot of fun things. So it's tricky because, on one end, maybe some of us can formulate our thoughts in a clear fashion and not repeat statements. But at the same time, I believe he's better at managing XSplit and managing the stuff offline than most of us are. And so it's tricky that some of us are developing certain skills faster than others as we go through Easy Allies. But that is an interesting point, and possibly something that we could explore once we get a studio, and once we kind of elevate ourselves back up to the level that we were at Game Trailers when it comes to having a fancy set and TVs in the background and having guests on and stuff like that. Maybe we can have somebody come in and maybe do an easy update or do like a series out of that as far as how to learn, to be better on camera and how to learn to be better. Because it's not only just how we talk and the words that we choose when we talk, but microphone control, how close we get to the microphone, how much the microphone blocks us, even when we shot And For That Reason, which you'll see very soon, and we used lav mics that we just recently got for that, and so that was a new, that was tricky. It was like, oh yeah, lav mics, getting used to these again, and wearing the right clothing that you can like pin a lav mic on and making sure you're not like constantly turning around so that the mic can pick you up. So other than repeating speech patterns, there's more stuff that we can get better at. And yeah, Matthias, there's definitely a point we will get to where it would be smart for all of us to work on that at the same time. But yeah, I don't think you're necessarily throwing something under the bus, throwing someone under the bus. It's always good to get creative, constructive criticism. But I think we all have weird things that we do on camera. I don't think any of us are perfect. Kian Jerome, if you could take an aspect from Kinda Funny or anyone else, what would it be? I.e. studio, show setup, etc. The video wall that Kinda Funny has. Done. End of story. That gigantic video wall. And Greg said when he came down here and shot some stuff with us, he said he was very proud of the fact that after they got that fancy pants video wall in the back of all of their shows, he saw lots of other people get a video wall as well. And he was like, oh, video wall now, huh? So yeah, that would be nice. And obviously money. Hogue Law, their money. Thank you, Hogue. Astray, or Astray. Is the couch coming to the studio when the 50K mark happens? Definitely. There will be no more couch in here. I think when we move to the studio, and I'm not streaming from here, like group streams don't happen from here, they happen from the studio. I think I might move Cup of Jones over to my desk. I think I might get like a permanent position where I get like maybe this camera specifically I just use for Cup of Jones. So you can get more of like a desk vibe, like, hey, what's up? I'm at work. Because yeah, the couch will move to the studio, but I think that might be the perfect time to maybe get a new couch. Maybe just go and replace this couch. It is an IKEA model couch, so if we swapped it out, you probably wouldn't tell the difference. But yeah, if you really like this couch, but then again, at the same time, depending on the studio space that we might one day get, we might want to get a bigger couch or a smaller couch or a different shaped couch. I don't know, but yeah, this couch will not be here. Or it might be. I don't know. There will be a couch at the new place. Don't worry. It's not like we're going to be like, couch has got to stay here. Can't have a couch. Kevin Junk, similar to Clips, maybe a This Week in Easy Allies would drive traffic and interest to other videos. Something like at Frame Track, we discussed XYZ. On the Easy A podcast, ABC was discussed. Spoiler mode for X posted, etc. So basically meaning, looks like Sunday or maybe even Monday, we look back at the previous week and say, hey, if you're just new to Easy Allies or if you haven't tuned into stuff, here's what you missed this week at Easy Allies. That would be a lovely video. That would definitely drive traffic. I don't know if that's something that we have time to do, considering if you were to watch all of our shows, it would take probably 10 to 12 hours to get caught up on all those things. That's why Easy Allies Clips work. Similar to Clips, if you're not familiar, we do a show called Easy Allies Clips, where we have our users on Twitch clip stuff out from our group streams and our solo streams, and then Mr. Michael Damiani puts all of that stuff together and gives you a little highlight reel. And the reason why that show can be produced is because our fans pick up the heavy lifting of pointing that stuff out. So if we were to come up with a system where people could do that, maybe that could work. Maybe that could be a goal down the road. I will add that too. I think that is an official takeaway. This week, or last week, I guess it would be. Last week tonight. Week in Easy A. It's a great idea. Way too time intensive right now, but obviously that would help us. Gar. G-A-H-R. Love the name. Gar. Erg. Gar. When there begins to be more patron-exclusive videos and one-off series, will there be an easier way to find them that doesn't involve diving deep into the catacombs of Patreon.com? I almost forgot to watch the latest spoiler mode because it simply wasn't easy to find. you can always, follow us on Twitter. We will point that stuff out to attract people to go and become a patron of Easy Ally so they can watch that stuff. When we put up the recent episode with Greg Miller from last week, we put that up so people could go check that out. Encouraged, Greg and the Kind of Funny crew to direct people to our Patreon if they wanted to check that out. Drop $1 and watch that episode. And it's also worth noting that that is what our beautiful tags are for. If you go to patreon.com/easyallies, click on posts, then you can see all of the wonderful tags on the side. So if there's a favorite show, like And For That Reason, when that starts out, we will definitely be tweeting that out. But if you want to catch episodes that you missed, possibly, you can go check the tags on Patreon. But Gar, you bring up an excellent point, which is it ain't easy to do that. It is kind of a sticky widget because it is something that we don't want to just throw out there to everybody so that people who don't give us money that aren't, behind that paywall will not have access to that. But at the same time, we want to promote it because we want to make it easy for people to find it that do. So if you do give us $1 or more, we want to make sure you get access to that stuff. So that is a concern, and we'll take your notes to heart and try to get better at promoting that stuff in the future if we are not good at it now. Zero the Clown, I'm curious to whether or not you, specifically, or the collective allies you, ever become frustrated with the rate at which Easy Allies is growing. Every day, of course. It's like, it's a roller coaster. One moment you're frustrated, one moment you're not. With groups like Kind of Funny, Funhouse, What's Good Games, NoClip, etc. gaining popularity at a seemingly faster rate, is there ever a feeling of frustration or even, and I doubt it, jealousy? Or are you content with where you are now, and when you get bigger in the future, you'll be happy that moment for where you're at then? Both. I mean, it's I'm assuming Zero the Clown, you are a student or you are employed or both. And I imagine you go through the same type of emotions where you are frustrated at your growth or your career one day, and then the next day you're not. And yeah, if you actually go back to last week, Greg and I touched on this, where we talk about, they have more patrons, they make more money on Patreon, but our reviews, when we do them, get way more views than the reviews that they do. And so, What's Good Games, we have a lot more followers on YouTube, and we make a lot more money through Patreon. But one thing I think What's Good Games does extraordinarily well, they have incredible access in the industry because of Andrea Renee goes out there and hustles, and she has a lot of great contacts that she's made over the years, and so they do a lot of fun collaborations with Facebook and stuff like that. I'm looking forward to their E3 coverage. And the What's Good Games has fantastic merch. I was actually talking to Andrea at Judges Week about who they do merch with and what ideas she had about some fun merch ideas that we could do. So I try to look at groups like that and pick out what I like that they do that I think would apply well to us, lessons that we learn from them. But at the same time, a lot of that happened at Judges Week, where a lot of us could be really frank about the trials and tribulations of getting into E3 this year, with them having, selling tickets to so many people, and the difficulty of going in and, getting our badges, because it's a little trickier because there's just like a lot of people going, and getting access to appointments and stuff like that. And just like the process of doing E3, coming out here for Judges Week, balancing the appointments that we're making for E3 versus what we're seeing at Judges Week. And so it's always nice to actually, for all those nights where I go to bed and I'm just like, oh, I want that Kind of Funny video wall. It's nice to talk to them and really get a more human reaction from them about, it seems like everything's going right for them sometimes, but of course they have to deal with issues just like the rest of us. And also, I think one of the things that makes me feel better whenever I potentially get jealous or frustrated is the fact that all of the names that you mentioned, Kind of Funny, Funhouse, What's Good Games, and NoClip, I think are very different from Easy Allies. I think I would be much more nervous if we were very specifically trying to do exactly what they were trying to do. And I think our style, our type of content, I think there's stuff that we do that is different from the type of content that they provide. And so if we are growing at faster or slower rates comparatively, whether that's whether you're talking about how many subscribers we have on Twitch, how much money we make on Patreon, how much viewership we have on YouTube, I think all things... I'm trying to think of the right phrase there. I just think it depends on the context of what you're talking about. And I think some things I'm happy about and some things I wish improved. But yeah, overall, I feel great. On this Tuesday morning, May 22nd, I'm feeling pretty darn good. We got an exciting week ahead of us. Villy Ranto, will we see a Hall of Greats stream on the 29th? May is a Hall of Greats month. Yes, I will bring that up. I don't know. It's crazy pre-E3 stuff, so possibly. Ian Gragnolati. I wanted to talk about a slight fear I have when the Allies eventually move into a studio. When similar channels have gone from the quote-unquote at-home feel to a true studio style, the vibe has changed. It became less friends and more business partners. This is something Kind of Funny dealt with after moving to a studio, where it began to cause tension between the members. Almost 2 years later, they found their balance, but it cost them one of their members. I fear that this will happen to the Allies. A studio could change the vibe and positivity and make it seem more like a business that needs upkeeping, which could cause hostility among the members. Yeah, I mean, if you want to directly compare us to Kind of Funny, I think one of the big differences is when Kind of Funny was at IGN before they left, Kind of Funny there was a direct employee to manager relationship, meaning all of the members at Kind of Funny were employees of IGN and then moved over to Kind of Funny and kind of all became their own bosses, where the game trailers that you saw, right, with the exception of Mr. Matt Blair, who has moved on to greener pastures, all of the people that you saw at game trailers when game trailers folded, just moved over to Easy Allies. So it wasn't like there was some boss and we were like, haha, we don't have that boss anymore. It was me. So and I'm still around. And so if we were to get back to that vibe, that Friends vibe, I think, just continued to evolve. We just kind of picked up where we left off after game trailers, and I think we will pick up where we leave off moving into a studio. And so I think that studio environment, in some ways, we've kind of lost the Friends vibe because we've lost the accessibility of making fun stuff when we just have the idea to do it. You know, when one of us will wake up and be like, oh, I have a funny idea today. Now it's like, okay, who's busy next Friday? And then we got to schedule that stuff, and then maybe some of those creative, off the top of your head inspirations might dull over time until the time it takes to actually gather and shoot that stuff. And so if we were all in a studio and we were all gathering like we were before, so I just think I think that stuff would happen easier. So I just don't think it'll be like weird when it happens when we get in a studio. It's like, whoa, this vibe is strange. We remember that vibe. That vibe was pretty awesome when we had it. And so I think we're looking forward to getting back to that. And it will not seem unusual to us because it'll be just like old times. Tarek Abdelmullah. I think I got it right in the first try. I'll leave it there. Just wondering if you guys ever considered cutting Frame Trap into 3 shorter 1-hour episodes and dividing the releases throughout the week. I mostly never have time to listen for 3 to 4 hours at once, whereas the podcast I can usually finish in one sitting. Not sure if this is the best idea, but still wanted to pitch it. Totally up to Ben Moore. I'm just going to leave it there. It's Ben Moore's show. I think that has been proposed to him. I think he's like kind of interested in doing that. You know, I don't know if we would... I don't think we would ever make that Frame Trap, meaning just split it up entirely, but we've talked about possibly picking like the most pertinent conversation from a Frame Trap and maybe splitting that out. But I don't want that to create confusion where people just watch that and go, this is a weird podcast, and not realize this isn't what actual Frame Trap is. Frame Trap is the whole thing, and this is just a segment of it. But at the end of the day, it's completely up to Ben. It's his show. Jesse Nye, I've noticed that allies like Ben, Kyle, and Damiani and Blood have recently started to edit various EZA videos. Is this something you've talked more about with the allies to reduce the workload from Ian, Don, and yourself? Yes. Or more something that naturally happened? Both. Also, do you think we'll see reviews edited by the other allies in the future? Probably not. It'd be amazing if Huber wrote and edited the RE2 remake review. Yeah, again, that's totally on them. They are, slowly but surely just kind of... case in point, Damiani cuts the Easy Allies clips videos, and Ben has always cut Frame Trap, I believe, or at least has cut Frame Trap certainly for a while now. And Kyle and Blood cut their own checking out videos when they do streams. They cut that stuff down. And I think Kyle has done some other editing. Kyle's cut some promos and stuff like that in the past. So yeah, they're slowly getting more comfortable doing that, but I don't want to speak for them, but I don't think there's like a ton of... I don't see a lot of desire, the burning fire in their eyes to cut reviews. I think they are happy passing that stuff on to us so that they can move on to the next review or have more time to prep for that stuff. Brian Paddock, but just, round of applause to them for doing more editing. Editing is very fun. Brian Paddock. What if, to help incentivize people, you made a Final Bosman-like show at 52K goal? I know Kyle is not interested in doing the show and is also busy with Box Peak. I love those two questions back to back. What if you brought back the Final Bosman? I mean, I know Kyle doesn't want to do it. Well, I don't know. However, you guys had no interest in doing top 10s and brought that back. I personally would double my pledge to help get to that goal. I know my pledge is only $5, so not a huge jump, but just food for thought. Always food for thought. Always something we can do. But it's totally up to Kyle. That is very much Kyle. That is a Kyle thing. I mean, the reason why we were able to do the top 10s is that's all of us. And so we kind of all had to agree, where we all can't agree on Final Bossman coming back. That is 120% a Bossman call. Tyler Grummett, why does no one owe Kyle an apology? When David Jaffe was publicly ridiculing Kyle because of a comedy bit Kyle did about him, I was getting considerably angry. No one insults our Kyle. Yeah, this is an interesting thing to talk about, because it's like if someone gangs up on Kyle or any one ally, is it our fiduciary duty to defend that person publicly? And I think in this instance, that stuff, it's usually like the next time we meet for group streams, that'll come up unless that person brings it up in Slack. And I think just that next group stream, we all were like, yeah, what was going on with Jaffe, Kyle? And Kyle was like, I said this for the Game Awards, or I said this at E3. I can't remember specifically where he made that statement. I believe it was I think it was neither. I think it was their YouTube show when he was doing the YouTube show with Keeley. He took a stab at David Jaffe, and he took a stab at everybody. That was Kyle's bit. He made fun of everybody. That was like the point of his bit, is that he's like, I'm gonna make fun of these games and people. And Jaffe was not a fan, and I think Jaffe has since walked back those comments. But I can't remember. I think it might not be PG-13 language. Whatever he said to Kyle, whatever he called him. It was great. Whatever quote it was, I always try to remember that so I can call Kyle that on occasion, because I feel that way about Kyle sometimes. Kyle can be a bitter pill to swallow sometimes, as much as I love him. But yeah, I think what happens in that process, Tyler, is that we all just check in with Kyle, like, how you doing? And Kyle's like, I'm fine, I don't care. I'm like, oh, okay. So if you didn't see us backing up Kyle publicly, it's because Kyle did not express a need for us to back him up publicly. So Kyle's fine. Kyle's got thick skin. VG Junkie, I wouldn't mind timed exclusivity instead of permanent exclusivity. In my opinion, that's the best of both worlds between rewarding patrons and generating views on content. This one, specifically last week's Greg Miller episode, this one especially would be a good video to release in the wild in about a week or so. Yeah, I think maybe a couple weeks. I was thinking about throwing it up today, but I didn't want to confuse that with the new Cup of Jones, and I'm also super busy this week. Yeah, that will eventually be public, I think, so people, because it's kind of a timeless conversation. It's not really pertinent to any one thing that's happened recently. If you missed it, I talked to Greg about our weird jobs and what it's like to build a community and communicate with that community communication, just talking with patrons, talking with fans, and running these wacko businesses of ours. And so, yeah, I think that would be pertinent and would be a fun thing for people to check out that necessarily aren't fans of Easy Allies, or aren't patrons of Easy Allies. David Barca, are there any plans, thoughts for doing... I can't always promise that, though, VG Junkie. There are some stuff that might always stay behind the paywall. Obviously, not every episode of Cup of Jones will go public at some point. Yeah, if we have something exclusive, know that we are definitely considering making that non-exclusive at some point down the road. It's just that we won't, kind of like when stuff comes out on DVD or when stuff gets ported to other consoles, we won't necessarily announce that right away. So there'll always be that question mark of like, when is it going to be available for everybody? Yeah, I'll drop my Patreon money now. David Barca, are there any plans, thoughts for doing local recordings of streams in case of issues with Twitch or internet connection? Also, the quality would be higher than the archiving of the stream. Yes, we normally do that, actually. More often than not, we are recording streams locally. And yes, the quality would be better. It's just a lot easier because that stuff just naturally migrates over to YouTube. Daniel Bloodworth, kudos to him for handling all of that stuff. And so just for the, to make things easier on us, that's why we take that, and it would be more time consuming to take the archive and then upload that to YouTube and wait for that upload to finish and then make that the clip. And so, but maybe that's something, if we get more staff on hand one day, maybe that's something that we could take that, wouldn't that be wonderful if we're like, once the group stream was over, we're like, all right, intern, have fun doing that. And then they could work on that while we all go home, go to bed. But, yeah, we do back that stuff up because there are always concerns about music licensing and getting muted or getting flagged for certain things and then wanting to change group streams after the fact before we upload them. Stuart Jack, I wanted to ask what's happened to a few different shows' streams. Specifically, Talking Syndrome, Gundam Construction, and GOG streams. Are these streams now extinct or just on a fairly long temporary hiatus? Talking Syndrome is on hiatus because Huber just got married and had some stuff that he had, some personal stuff that he had to deal with, and so he took time off from that. So I would, you and I are both waiting with bated breath to see if Talking Syndrome makes a comeback, or if Huber's interested in possibly evolving that show. Gundam Construction is on hiatus because Kyle is focusing primarily on Box Peak right now, and GOG streams, specifically referencing GOG.com. We used to have a relationship with them where they helped promote Easy Allies, and we streamed games from the GOG library. Technically, that was tough to do every time, and it was hard to have like one person producing that, basically. Like the way that we can guarantee consistency with our shows is to have one person that is like myself. Cup of Jones doesn't happen unless I work on it, and so we always try to have one specific producer of that show, or at least one. And GOG never really found that one producer. There was never really one of us that had the time or specifically was terribly interested in putting the work required to make that happen on a regular basis. And so, unfortunately, we do not have that partnership anymore. Might be something we return to eventually, but yeah, GOG streams are now extinct, and Talking Syndrome and Gundam Construction are on a fairly long temporary hiatus. Dab, will we see a preview from all of the equipment that you got? I know some of the things will need time to get set up, but a behind-the-scenes video from you and Ian setting up the office would be great. Yes, it would, and you'll get it. Greg Kettering, is there a reason why Trailer Jones didn't get the Patreon early access treatment? Was it because it was the pilot and this will be the case moving forward? Also, the $1 tier title still calls it the Cup of Jones tier. However, since the revamp, you've been calling it the exclusive shows tier and the Patreon plugs. I recommend refreshing the tier title and description. Yes. It's an excellent takeaway. Change the $1 tier description. Yes. I didn't put that up, like early access, if you will, for two reasons. One, didn't really talk about it. Like, there was not a thing that came up when we changed that tier. There were still shows that aren't, like, not every show that we do fits into the early access thing. So I don't think there was ever a promise made that Trailer Jones would. Obviously, I think one of the biggest criticisms that I haven't read, because I haven't actually dug through a lot of the comments on Patreon and YouTube for the first episode of Trailer Jones. I think I will go in and read those before we produce the second episode, so I can take those under advisement. But I wanted to get that up as soon as possible because we talked about the last Deadpool trailer, and the episode didn't go up until Deadpool had been in theaters, I think, for 2 days. And so I was like, all right, it's Deadpool 2 weekend, let's get this episode up. And so I didn't want to postpone that yet, down the road even further for people that weren't patrons of Easy Allies. And it never really came up in conversation. And it definitely came up after the fact, where I think Bloodworth reached out to me and was like, are we doing that early access? What's happening? And so I think we will consider that beforehand. I don't know if we'll do that for E3 either, because it'll be an E3 specific episode of Trailer Jones. And so I don't know if we want to delay that, because obviously with E3 coverage, the sooner the better. And but possibly for a July episode, we will do that. We will do patron early access treatment on that. Jet Eater. Now that Easy Allies... Oh, and Swordfish says it was still enjoyable to watch even after he watched the film already, which is good to hear. Thank you. Now that Easy Allies has moved on to a 20-point rating system, you no longer have an outline for what each score means, like you had with your previous rating system, and you've said that these two systems are not comparable. I know that with me, it is hard for me to understand what each individual score means when I just see a number out of 10, especially when 7 seems to be the score for mediocre these days, which doesn't make too much sense to me. You even stated in Trailer Jones that 7 is the average trailer for you. I think average and mediocre, it's tough. I mean, it's tough how you specifically define those words. But mediocre can still be great. I was talking about Days Gone. I think Days Gone will probably be a 7-ish game. But if a 7 is right up your alley, if you're like, hey, I just like JRPGs, and you get a 7, you'd probably love the hell out of that 7 because you just love JRPGs. I love open world games. So even if I was to give a game a 7, and it was an open world game, I would still probably love playing it because that's my type of genre. But I don't want to speak out of turn as far as like what those scores actually mean. Have you considered writing up what each score means specifically for the allies like some other sites do? I understand that people will criticize for looking into a score too much, but in that case, I don't know why we would be scoring in the first place. Yes, Jet Eater, there are a lot of videos like that that we have been putting off because we are making so many changes right now. We just made a bunch of changes with our Patreon goals. We're going to be making a lot of technical changes with Easy Allies this week, swapping out equipment, moving some stuff around here in the garage. And so we're waiting for all of that stuff to be done, and then we're going to be making a lot of new promo videos, a lot of new Welcome to Easy Allies videos, a lot of new pitch videos for the next phase of Easy Allies studios, new shows, and the like. Yeah, so we will get to that. I'm not going to make a promise because I don't think... we definitely got a thumbs up from all the allies that they would want to still have that, but I think it would make sense. Maybe not at the 0.5 level, but maybe for like to specify what a 10 means, what a 9 means, what an 8 means. Yeah, and then to wrap up, we're actually making really good time on this Cup of Jones. To wrap up the business feedback, we have 2 comments about last week's editorial that I think I would get into. About what is appropriate for a comment. And 2 people brought up points that I think are good, that I will learn from, and that I will take to heart, even though I got a lot of comments, social media, direct messages, emails, comments on there where a lot of people were like, oh, your editorial was really great, thank you for posting that, you chose your words very carefully. But like anything, there's a lot to learn, and I think these are 2 good points to remember. Eric H. Ever heard of Don't Feed the Troll, Jones? Why would you validate that person with a whole editorial? I would not be surprised if that person laughed their ass off the whole time. Now they know they can indeed get a rise out of people with stuff like that. I have spoke with the person I talked about last week offline. I know... I mean, you know, you can never... That was kind of the point of the editorial last week. You never know for sure how people feel and what's going on in their heads when they comment on the interwebs. But I don't think I fed the troll because it wasn't... The editorial last week happened because of a comment that was made by a specific patron. But I made the editorial to talk about, on a broader sense, what was appropriate to talk about on Patreon, what was appropriate to discuss here at Easy Allies, what was appropriate for this show that we do, Cup of Jones. And so I felt it was a good opportunity to talk about that, the general question. So I don't think it's feeding the troll because if I get another troll comment like that, I don't necessarily want to label that as a troll comment. If I get another comment like that, or if I were to get something that I think would be much more trollish, I would probably just do a little comment on Patreon and say, hey, I don't think that's appropriate. I would advise you not to leave comments like this in the future. I would not bring it up on Cup of Jones. I think that editorial 2 weeks ago, would be Snowcone Guy. Wait, what? 2 weeks ago. Go check it out. Yeah, I don't think it's a troll question either, Toshigami. So yeah, it was the editorial was more about just the general sense of like what's appropriate or not, and not necessarily directed at one specific person. So I guarantee, again, I don't use that word very often, I guarantee you will not see an editorial like that again on Cup of Jones. Because if stuff like that comes up again, I will just not reference it, and I will ignore that kind of stuff. At least on the show, so we don't have to deal with all that heaviness. We'll talk about other heavy issues. Georgia Burrows, I do think it was perhaps unfair to mention that patron by name, as they will now have a sort of black mark on their name in a community that, from what I understand, they are very active in. This is maybe important for someone who I suspect has trouble in social situations. Hear me out. You could have called him out just by reading the comment. This would mean he would still know that you were talking about him and that he did a bad thing, but without putting their target over their head, I'm sure the community will still remain to be respectful to them regardless, but there are still those outliers. I agree with Georgia. I think that's a great point. Yes. If I was to go back in time, I would just say this comment was left, read the comment, but don't necessarily say that person's name. I think that's an excellent point. So yeah, ding, thumbs up. Hey, let me take a long sip out of this guy before we get on to our personal questions. So when I'm doing the timestamp for this later, I will know when this happens. So everybody take a sip of your coffee or your beverage, your tea. Tokyo Slim, what's up? Tokyo Slim's just getting it. Intermission, yeah. All right. Alexandra Nilsson Tofsa. I've been thinking a lot, due to several reasons, about being a game developer and a game journalist at the same time. When does it become too couldn't choose adjective inappropriate, shady, ethically indefensible for someone to have both professions? Let's say working for both a big game publisher and a big media outlet. Do you think there's a moral limit? Yeah, this has definitely happened in the industry. I think one of the greatest examples is Greg Kasavin, who used to work at GameSpot and now works for Supergiant and has made Transistor and Bastion and Pyre, I believe, is their most recent game. So, or you got Mitch Dyer, who wrote for Battlefront 2. So there is definitely a precedent for people in the industry, journalists, to leave the journalism field and go into game development. And a lot of times there's a very clear separation where people are like, all right, I'm doing this job, now I'm doing this job. I've since completely removed myself from that. I'm still involved with games, but I don't report on them or do that stuff anymore. I think reviews are a strong moral limit. That was a concern of ours when we started setting up sponsors, which we did not have specifically back at Game Trailers, but having sponsorship here at Easy Allies. And you have someone like people that have sponsored us in the past. Of course, Scorn is one that's sponsored us almost forever. So I think the moral limit would be we cannot review Scorn. You know, we cannot review I think we can still review games Sweet Justice works on, because we're not necessarily going to speak to. I think if you saw a review of Battlefront 2 or something, and we're like, and the sound design is just the absolute best part of this, we're giving this a 10 because of the sound design. You'd be like, wait a minute. But if we specifically had a developer come in and sponsor something, I think that would not be prudent for us to then attach a score to that game. I think we could still talk about it. We could still cover it, we could still offer our opinions about it, but actually applying a score to something that would then be factored into the official Metacritic, I think is gross. So I think that would be the line, and obviously it would be shady not to disclose such things. So if we were to work for a company, or if one of us, even if some of this on the periphery, so Mr. Don Casanova is not necessarily involved in a lot of the day-to-day stuff that we do here at Easy Allies. He's not on our podcast. He does not join us for our Q&A that we do at the end of every month. But he does send out fan mail. He does do his own shows. He hangs out for the group stream. So there is stuff he's involved in. And he also works at Funhouse. Ian's roommate, Omar, also works at Funhouse. And so even us working it for other outlets, we try to be as transparent as possible in our language when we talk about those things, so we don't have any backdoor shady deals. So yeah, I think the line again would be officially scoring a game and making sure we disclose all of that stuff when it does happen. Yeah, I think there's more to say there, but it's not coming into the dome right now, so I will leave it at that. Warm feelings, whether they be professionally, historically, personally, or encompassing of all three. Who are your role models? That's fascinating. when I grew up, James Cameron was one of my role models, I think, artistically. James Cameron personally can be kind of a nightmare, as I've realized more as I've gotten older, that he can not be a fun person to deal with. And while I think historically, personally, and professionally, there are lots of things that you can be frustrated about with Walt Disney, I think Disney, more than anything, is somebody that I've wanted to emulate, and I've just been endlessly inspired by. It's crazy. I was just at Disneyland this weekend, and it's crazy. I do have to doubt the authenticity of this, because it just seems too good to be true that they actually found the bench that Disney was sitting on when he dreamed up Disneyland. So if you don't know the story, Disney used to take his kids to the park and to like fairs and carnivals and stuff like that. And he was at a carnival. The place totally escapes me. Something like Tivoli Gardens that we recently talked about, which is in France, pretty sure. Again, I guess they like found this bench that he was sitting on when he was like watching parents, and he was basically noticing that parents, when they would take their kids to the park to have fun, the parents weren't having fun. You know, their parents were just like, okay, you go have fun, kids, and I'll just be sitting on this bench reading my newspaper. And he was thinking, why can't the parents have fun too? Like, why can't you make a place where parents can have fun and kids can have fun, the whole family can have fun, that you can have fun regardless of what age you are? And so they like found the bench, and they're like, this is the bench. And you're like, okay. I mean, it could be any bench. You could have like built this bench. I mean, the Imagineers, you know, I could easily see them like just building a bench and weathering it, you know, and making it kind of, looking at pictures of him sitting on some bench somewhere and like making it look like that bench. So I don't know. It could be smoke and mirrors. But I think that is profound what that man has accomplished. I love, you know, what he did in the early avenues of animation. And I think what makes me the proudest when it comes to Disney is that so many things that he did, everyone around him, everybody just told him it was a bad idea. Like every single person was like, what, you're getting into animation? Okay, that's a tricky business. You're gonna make your own animation company? All right, we'll see how that goes. He originally created Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and then lost the rights to that, and so he created Mickey Mouse, and people were like, oh, you're gonna make your second animation character? We'll see how that goes. Huge success. Oh, you're building your own theme park? We'll see how that goes. Huge success. Oh, you're gonna make a feature-length animated movie? No one's gonna sit through all of that. Huge success. So like, a lot of what he did, he was going against the grain and going against not only the, you know, the trepidation or the just not being supported by, you know, the not necessarily the industry, but just you know, the people, his close friends were like, this is a bad idea. Especially with Disneyland, they were like, this is not going to work out. And Disneyland, in his first couple years of operation, a lot of stuff broke. They learned that a lot of the stuff that they designed was not working as intended, which is why it's fascinating to go to Disneyland and then go to Disney World and see how much wider it is and see like all the lessons that they learned when they built the second park, you know, a decade or two later. Yeah, probably Disney more than anything. It depends when you talk about role models, and so I don't want to go on and on and on about other role models. I'll just kind of leave it at that because Lord knows I talk about Disney a lot. Jamie Hyland, what would be your ideal Batman Forever game? Batman Forever? Batman Forever? For some reason, I initially read that as Batman Beyond, but Batman Forever. Okay. He didn't capitalize Forever, though. So, I don't know if he meant the movie Batman Forever? My ideal Batman game would always be open world, every time. And my ideal Batman open world game, and the Arkham games never did this, which bummed me out, but I would love a... I don't need to be that close to Batman. You're so close to him in the Arkham games. He's so huge in the frame. Just pull that camera back, baby. Give me a little tiny Batman so I can really get a sense of like how small he is, and you know, it'll make the world look bigger. I don't need photorealism in a Batman game. I think you can make something stylized in order to make the world bigger. Case in point, if you wanted to make something based on the animated series, it does not necessarily need to look like, I don't need it to look like the crazy Naruto games or Dragon Ball FighterZ. But I would love a Batman game where once you beat the campaign, it still continues. So it does kind of like a randomly generated villain scenario creator, you know, so like they pick a villain, they pick a location, you got to go stop them, and then maybe have two villains operating at the same time, so you got to choose who to rescue or what people to rescue or what villains to stop. And then if you don't stop a villain, so say Penguin is robbing a bank and Two-Face is gonna blow up a bridge or something, and you're like, I can only do one or the other. If you pick Two-Face over Penguin, Penguin will successfully rob that bank, then get more money. Then the next time the Penguin does something, he'll have more assets, he'll have more guards, and so he'll be tougher to take down. And so you have to gauge how strong you're willing to let certain people grow until you finally take them down, and just kind of like manage the city and manage all of the villains in that way. Even if the game itself was like that, even if you had kind of like a procedurally generated Batman game that didn't necessarily have a quote-unquote campaign, like a story arc, I would play the hell out of that game. Aurélien Grenier, I hear you saying that AI is the worst Spielberg movie, and I disagree so much. First of all, because I actually think AI is a good movie. Awesome. And it's an interesting debate. And then second, have you seen Always? Aurélien isn't asking for my take on AI, so I don't know if... I think I talked about AI on the group stream a couple weeks ago. I don't remember when I talked about AI. I don't think it came up on Cup of Jones. And then second, have you seen Always? Always starring Richard Dreyfuss and John Goodman, I believe, and Deborah Winger, I think, about a airplane pilot who dies and then comes back and it's kind of like the movie Ghost, except it's less about like solving a murder mystery and more of when do you say goodbye to someone? Is it okay? When someone loses a spouse, it's difficult to then move on and maybe remarry someday because you always have that thought in the back of your head, am I being unfaithful? Is this person watching me? And so it's that kind of like, the person who lives on, moving on with their lives, the person who died, moving on with their, spiritual journey. And yeah, I did, but I was like in the 80s. That was 30 years ago. So I can't say if Always is better than AI. I didn't remember that Spielberg directed Always. Spielberg produces a lot of movies, and so it's tough in a lot of the early stuff to delineate what Spielberg directed versus what Spielberg just produced. I think AI is so bad because, in my eyes, I like the vibe of the movie. It's got that Spielberg dreamy, fantasy quality where the music is really great and the world is so fascinating to look at. But I think the thing that, really kind of stunk up AI for me the last time I saw it is because I can't remember a movie I've seen in recent memory that I revisited from a previous viewing where I had problems with almost every scene. Like, every time they were introducing something, I was like, what? I was like, wait, that doesn't work. That character wouldn't do that. And then the next scene is like, wait, technology doesn't work that way. And then the next scene, it's like, wait, you set that up incorrectly because 20 minutes ago you said this thing and now you're doing this. And then like case in point, I'll give you one example. So this is in the future, right? So this is like, in the future, we have fancy robots, and the robots can do whatever they want. And so you have the character of Jude Law, who is a gigolo, is a sex robot. So it's a robot that you hire for sexual, needs and whatnot. And he, they obviously have female versions of that. He is the male version of that. He is Gigolo Joe. What do you know? I love his performance. I think Jude Law is fascinating in that. There's a lot of really great takes. There's one really long shot in the forest between him and Haley Joel Osment that's really fun because he does a lot of really cool physicality. And it's neat that it's all in one take. So it reminds me of just the beauty of theater when you actually see like a dance sequence or something that was rehearsed so many times. And so his performance is really fun, but he does this thing where he'll play music and he'll have a recording that he'll play sometimes to like entice people. So they introduced that early on where he's playing music to try to get somebody in the mood. And then later he plays the music throughout the film. And he does like a head cock whenever he starts the music. So he's just like whenever he's playing music. Why? Why does Gigolo Joe need to do that to play music? What? Like, why is that the only system that he operates that he needs a head bob to operate? Like, what? Like, what? Like, I get that, like, you give him, like, a tick or something to, like, accentuate him turning it on, but, like, it's just funny to me because you're trying to get somebody in the mood, like you're staring at someone and trying to get them enticed into being in a close physical proximity with you, especially with that person knowing that you're a robot. And so it's like the uncanny valley, like they're staring at you knowing like anything that you could possibly do that would seem unnatural or weird or non-human like would throw me off. And then that person goes like that and you're like, it's like, what was that? Why did you do that? Like, why wouldn't the music just start playing? Why wouldn't whatever chip is going on in his brain with those incredibly complex electrical signals that are going throughout his brain and throughout his body that are making him operate? Why does that motion, like, it's just one of those things that, like, stylistically you think of, and then the actor has such a fun time, embodying, and the writers have such a fun time realizing that you never stop to think, wait, well, that doesn't make sense. It's kind of, and there's just a lot of those moments in AI for me that you're like, I get stylistically what's going on here, but this is absurd. Like, this just doesn't make sense. And there's just a lot of that in AI. Almost every scene worth, where I'm like, what? Like, I know you're trying to make me like that character, but now you just made me hate that character. There's just a lot of those weird things. So that's an example of why I think that movie doesn't hold up. Just one of them. But if you love that movie, that's great. There are lots of films that are bad movies that I like a lot. So I'm going to say that I did not think that film held up, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hold up as a fact. Sorry. I need to calm down. Jones rant on AI. Kola Aina. I hope I got that right. It's a beautiful name. Kola Aina. Can you tell us what you like about Michael Huber? We all love him. Give us some Huber love hype. You betcha. Huber got married this weekend, everybody. And can you all just for a moment imagine a Huber wedding? The love and the excitement that comes. And so I'm thinking as we go in, like, okay, this Huber wedding is gonna be reserved, because like Huber's Huber, that he gets excited the way that he gets excited, the language that he used, the volume level that he attains. But this is a wedding. It's gonna be a little more reserved. That was a straight up Huber wedding. Like that, with just hearing, his lovely wife now talking about him and what she loves about him, hearing his brother and family members talk about them meeting Michael for the first time and learning what they did about Michael. Every single time they mentioned something about Huber, it was like, yeah, that's Huber. And I think one of the things that came up is the genuineness of Huber. Even though we do Cup of Jones every week, even though this is live, even though there's no filter here, this is just one continuous take of me talking about all sorts of stuff, I'm still reserved sometimes. I still like to pick my words carefully and try to be the best public speaker that I could possibly be. And I think Huber is just a little more raw than that. I think Huber just sometimes cannot help himself. I think, case in point, we go up for him to cut the cake. And it's such a special moment, you're gonna cut the cake, this is great. And so we all go up and we're so close and we're all, huddled around him. And Huber takes a moment to point out the specific nerdy details about, the glasses they were drinking or what it said on the cake to make sure we understood the references. How Huber is that? To make sure, you see the reference here? It's like, Huber, it's your wedding, just do the... But that's him. He can't hide who he is and the desire that he has, to express his passions about these things. And so it's always funny to me when I meet people and they're like, yeah, I like Huber, but I wish he would just tone that down a little bit because it's obviously fake. And like, it's really not. That is as genuine, not only as genuine as you can possibly be when it comes to Mike Huber, but I think he is just one of the most genuinely enthusiastic human beings. And I think a seminal moment, like a very, very pivotal moment in the history of technically Easy Allies, because we used to be Game Trailers and now we're Easy Allies, was this Shenmue reaction. And I was upset that I wasn't there to enjoy that. I think one of my favorite things about that Shenmue reaction, for some of you who might not know what I'm talking about, just do Game Trailer Shenmue reaction, and you can see Huber just absolutely losing his mind from a Shenmue 3 getting announced. The seemingly most impossible of gaming dreams coming to fruition, and you seeing it happen in his eyes. I don't think we'll ever get something like that again, because it was just so special and unique. And I think one of my favorite things about that was Elise. The lovely Elise, who is now at Funhouse, who we used to have the privilege of working directly with. And you can see her kind of caught between Ian, who is in the booth on her right, Huber, who is on her left, and her feeling the energy of Brad and Huber just freaking out on each other, and then Elise between them. And there's just this one moment where she turns to Ian and smiles, because Ian is freaking out about the press conference in general, but she can also kind of tell that, they own this. This whole moment right now is really just about Huber. This has now officially become Huber's stream. And she just turns to Ian and smiles because, Ian and Elise have been longtime friends and still are. And so I think that one reaction from her just kind of encapsulates the wonderment of that moment. And the most Huber moment that I have ever seen. And I hope somebody could link that in chat. I don't know if you can recall specifically what show it was. Because I don't think it was a frame trap. I think it was specifically like a preview or reactions we were doing to something. But we were in the middle of shooting reactions to something, and Huber pulls out his phone and goes, "Dude, did you see this announcement?" And we're like, "Huber, we're recording something. We're recording of reactions to something completely different." And he just goes totally off the rails because he is so excited about the next thing that he doesn't realize we're actually recording a show. He thought we were rehearsing it or something. I don't know. And so obviously you want us to be as focused as we possibly can. You want us to make sure the conversations that we are having are as pertinent to the subject matter as possible. But at the same time, when he just completely is untethered and you cut the string on the kite and the kite just goes flying off into the clouds, it's Huber at his most genuine. And I wouldn't change a darn thing about that. Because we get those beautiful moments. And so, yeah, that's why I love Huber, because of how just crazy he can get about the things that he is passionate about, and his just crazy, uncanny ability to make these things happen, to have a dream and then have it actually happen because he wants it that bad. Huber is also really good at making developers fall in love with him. Huber, when he's excited about a game like For Honor, or when he's excited about God of War, he'll very quickly and easily develop a very strong relationship with the team, or specifically the game director or producer, and they will reach out to him and be like, "I love this guy. This guy's great." So, that is him doing his fiduciary duty for Easy Allies. Maggie Freyer, as a fellow Disney fan, I was wondering what your thoughts are about the Guardians of the Galaxy being added to Epcot and replacing the Universe of Energy ride. This is the first I've heard of this. I did not know that happened. A lot of people are very upset about Guardians coming in and bringing a ride that is not educational, which was the original intent of that front half of the park. Epcot is the park I frequent the most over at Disney World due to the events that they have going on all year. Interesting. And for a while, Future World has felt like a forgotten area, so I'm torn about the decision. I love Guardians, but I understand the concern. Since the Maelstrom was replaced with Frozen, that I knew happened, it seems to be a growing trend. Along with that, were you upset when Guardians replaced the Tower of Terror in California Adventure? Do you think Disney will continue to replace current rides with more IP-focused ones? Yeah, I'm on the fence too. I was bummed that the Frozen replaced the Maelstrom because the Maelstrom was about Norway and I'm Norwegian, so I liked going there and being like, my people who drill oil in the middle of the ocean and somehow have trolls, I guess, or a very, when you talk about Norwegian folklore or just the history of Norway, it's you gotta mention trolls, the actual trolls, warts and under bridges kind of trolls. I was initially bummed when Tower of Terror went away, and now it's I don't even know, the Galaxy Breakout or something? Guardians of the Galaxy Tower Breakout? I don't remember. I'm also bummed because I've been on the ride 4 times now, and I've only gotten 2 different versions of it. I get the Jackson 5 every time. I've only gotten 1 time where I didn't get the Jackson 5. And there are, I guess, 5 or 6 different versions of that tower. Mission Breakout, I think it's called. And so, yeah, I want those other songs, darn it. I want those other vignettes. So, yeah, I think every time they do that initially, I'm bummed, but I have to understand why they're doing it. Obviously, they're also in 2020. We're gonna get the extension of that Hollywood area to be more of like a Marvel land. Bugs Life is going away, and they're marveling up that part. They're gonna add an Avengers ride and a Spider-Man ride in the back there. So I think that Towers area, that Guardians ride, will make more sense when they add more Marvel stuff around it, and that kind of becomes more of a Marvel themed section of the park. But my thoughts are 50-50, Maggie. It sucks, but I totally understand when they do it, and I think the more those things happen, I think the most upset I've ever been about a ride changing is when they when they said they were going to change up Pirates. And I was like, hey, that's kind of the last thing Disney did before he died, so maybe don't change that. Maybe keep Pirates as a tribute to Disney. I understand that things in Disneyland have to change, but maybe it's like that scene in Beetlejuice where he's like, maybe just this room we keep the same. But it's too much to ask. They're gonna change things, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you got to get used to it. Be upset, voice your concerns, but eventually move on. Daniel Garza Andrade, how do you manage to keep in mind what Amanda is doing, what play she is in, what show she appears on? Do you chat every hour or until she gets home for dinner and have the usual talk during that time? We've gotten better at that, Daniel. I think it helps before you go to bed, or at least one point in the day, to talk about the next day. Amanda and I share calendars. So on our Google Calendar on our phones, we are synced up. Case in point, for Judges Week last week, every day, or I was a little late in doing this, but as much as possible, I tried to write in, here's where I'm going to be. Specifically, I would have the address on there, so in case something happened to me, or she was not able to get a hold of me, she could at least, have a number that she could call, or an address that she knew, at least like a ballpark figure of where I was and what I was doing. She's very good at putting into her calendar what she's doing. All the events are color coded, so I can just look and see the different colors and know, she's got rehearsal for that, or okay, she's going to be going to yoga or doing stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything. It's discussing weeks ahead of time, discussing the next day before that day happens, and then having that stuff in the calendar. But even that, sometimes I'm like, one thing that I'm terrible at, and I don't know why, is Amanda's really good at is very proactive when it comes to us going camping. So Amanda will pick a camping location, we'll reserve that spot, weeks or months in advance. I'm unfortunately going to be missing the Kind of Funny prom, which is a bummer because I'm going to be going camping. But I honestly couldn't tell you where. I don't remember where we're going camping, and for some reason, I just always forget that stuff. And so I'm terrible at that. So sometimes I'm bad at it, but most of the time I know what Amanda's up to. She might be at her desk right now. She might be listening to these words right now. Heaps of Ram. I love that name. Heaps of Ram. I was wondering if you had any general thoughts from your personal perspective about how to balance that discomfort with the potential to offend. It can be quite difficult from an outsider perspective at times to judge whether or not something will hurt someone until it is, unfortunately, too late. It's never too late, and that's my answer. We'll get to that in a second. In a sense, it's a bit unavoidable in certain cases. I would say it's always unavoidable. You never know. How do we move forward and have these discussions frankly with an openness that can address the ignorance that we all suffer from in such a way that minimizes the negative impact the discussions may have? Are negative feelings or discomfort in some capacity necessary to truly understand where these lines are? Yes. I think that's it. I think you nailed it in that last sentence. That people that are offended by things have to understand that people sometimes making those statements that are offensive need to make them in order to understand how much they can hurt people. That I think if you're going to make a comment on the internet, I think in order to do this process, we can never expect somebody to just know beforehand, well, you just should have known that was going to be offensive. A lot of times it's tough because you have to understand their walk of life and what brought them to that point. I think the main thing that gets into a troubling area is the repeat offender. When you see someone that made a statement that they did not know was offensive, a bunch of people reached out to them and said, hey, I think that's kind of messed up that you said that, and then they didn't reply to those people and then continually made those types of comments. I think the more and more somebody doubles down on something offensive that they had said in the past, then they start to lose a little bit of credibility when it comes to people saying like, no, I really want to grow and get smarter and get better at this stuff when it comes to putting my best foot forward and trying to speak in a way that satisfies everybody at the same time. I think no matter what, even despite my best efforts, you know that I'm always tippy-toeing around people. I've had some people email me in a positive and negative light saying that, like, you clearly want to make everybody happy, don't you, Jones? And of course, you know, my job operates because I have people directly financially funding me. And so I want to be as grateful and as understanding and as open to change as I possibly can be, because people are paying top dollar for this type of content. And so I want to be as understanding as I can, but I have to understand that sometimes I'm going to offend. Sometimes I'm going to step over the line. And so if I'm going to learn from that, I try to communicate that as directly as possible and saying, whoops, I made a mistake. We just talked about the editorial that I did 2 weeks ago. I made some mistakes there. I've learned from that. I'm going to try to put those into practice moving forward. But also at the same time, even when someone raises a concern, I try to be as vocal as possible and as direct and honest as possible to those people and say, I hear where you're coming from. I don't think I'm going to make as many drastic changes to my behavior as you would like or would be anticipating. Here's why, and apologize for that. I think you just need to be as open as possible. I think one of the trickiest things when it comes to people that consider themselves comedians, I think sometimes you have people that don't write jokes for a living. Patton Oswalt is a good example. I think a lot of times he will say some racy things on social media. Ricky Gervais does that quite frequently. And it's tough because that's their job. You know, their job is to be a comedian. And so sometimes they're going to swing and miss, and sometimes they're going to knock it out of the park. And I'm more sympathetic with those types of people because I recognize that this is what they do. This is what they get paid to do. This is their craft. This is what they want to get better at. And so if they say something that I'm like, yeah, that's not nice. You should maybe dial that back. I'm a little more sympathetic when it comes to them because, again, that's their trade. That's what they're doing day in, day out. And that's their job that they're hopefully getting better at. And the only way they can get better at that is to try things out. A lot of times when they're writing a new comedy routine, they'll try it out with their friends and loved ones. And then when it passes that bar, then they go out and they do it at local clubs, or, you know, sometimes they'll do it in their hometown because they feel a little more comfortable with people that really, you know, love them and will appreciate them through whatever. And so if stuff doesn't play to those crowds, okay, well, I'll make sure to cut that. And then they take that on the big scale, and they take that to, to a Netflix special or an HBO special. And then sometimes stuff like that will offend people, and so they then have to take those reactions and realize, oh, okay, you know, that got a much bigger reaction than I was anticipating. And so I think it is always a learning process. I don't think you should ever get to a point where you're like, well, I'm the best at this. I think you should always know that there are lessons to be learned. There are mistakes that you're just inevitably going to make. And I think the responsibility lies much more in how you how you learn from those mistakes after the fact than how you implement lessons before the fact. I think if you learn things and make mistakes and learn from them and then implement them in the future, I tend to respect people more from them identifying that, well, hey, I made a mistake, or being open to criticism after they said something than necessarily being like, you should have gotten that right the first time. I tend to kind of look back at their behavior and be like, how many times have they made that mistake, rather than somebody just making a mistake outright. That was a little rambly, sorry for that. Michael Wilson, I know you said you don't play Final Fantasy XIV. Incorrect, I do. I've played Final Fantasy XIV twice. When it first launched, I played it on PlayStation 4 and PC, and then, PS3. I played it a lot on PS3, and then I took a hiatus, and then had to create a new account because I wasn't able to access my old account because I think it was like assigned to the PS3, and so switching it over to PC was different, so I just said, screw it, and I made a new account, made a new character, and that was the one that you can see in the early days of streaming with Damiani when he did his Eorzean Allies streams. My Marcus Kresnik character, you can see me pop up a little bit. So I created that new character. So I have played Final Fantasy XIV quite a bit. But you have had a chance to watch. Have you had a chance to watch any videos of the Final Fantasy VI battles introduced a few months ago? The Kefka battle is particularly cool. I have seen it. It is very, very cool. There's a 1-minute video of someone reacting to the transition to the last phase of the battle. Yep, I got a buddy of mine named Todd who still plays that game a lot. He and I are both big Final Fantasy VI fans. That is actually one of the first things when we met each other that we nerded out on, where it was like, you like Final Fantasy VI? I like Final Fantasy VI. Locke just got added to Dissidia. So anytime Final Fantasy VI news happens, I am there, and I am all over it. So yeah, I'm aware of that stuff. And it's so cool. But it's still a time sink. I don't know if I'll ever have time to get back to 14. The Champ. If DC and Marvel had an all-out battle royale with all their characters, who do you think would win? What do you think would happen in the battle? And who do you think would be the last person standing? If it's too many characters, then the MCU, movies, Netflix, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., versus DCU, movies, Arrowverse, animated movies. I mean, Batman. Come on. Batman would win everything. I think Batman would spend most of the time... Like, Batman wouldn't show up when it started. Batman would, if it was Fortnite Battle Royale, Batman would drop in right at the periphery and just be right on the edge the entire time. Would let everybody fight each other, would study their patterns, would deduce who probably the most likely person to win would be, and then would find a way to slowly weaken them, or you build up strategies to fight them, and then would destroy them at the end. I'm sorry if that's an easy answer, but I'm always gonna pick Batman. Batman with an hour to prepare is the joke, isn't it? Said Bradley Spees. Yeah, you wouldn't have an hour to prepare, but he would have as much time to prepare as everybody else. And I think, yeah, it's a safe answer, but it's not only that, like, I pick Batman because I like Batman so much, but I think that's also kind of the point of Batman. Like, Batman is that trump card. Batman always, it's like that's kind of part of his MO, is that he's the one that is preparing the most for any possibility, and so he's the one that easy answers with the easy allies. Excuse me. Davis, in your opinion, what do you think is the timetable for the Switch to be getting all major AAA games to come to it? From Software, Rockstar, etc. Or do you think this will never happen for the Switch? I don't think it'll ever happen. Meaning, the Switch gets everything. So if any AAA game is released, the Switch is going to get it. Obviously, Sony's got the exclusivity on all sorts of crazy stuff. So that if that stuff isn't coming to PC or Xbox, it sure ain't coming to the Switch. And I think that the Switch is still surviving and still kicking butt because of it's the fun exclusives that it does have. And I think we're going to be kind of seeing these peaks and valleys with the Switch, where these points are going to drop off, where you're going to fill in the gaps with some games like Tropical Freeze that maybe you didn't get a chance to play on previous Nintendo consoles or on other consoles that are now, after the fact, coming to the Switch. And then when things pick back up again and gear up more towards a Smash Brothers or a Animal Crossing or a Yoshi or a Kirby or something like that, then that's when you're just dialed in on Switch. That's when it's trending. That's when everybody's playing it, and then it'll dip back down again, and then some cool new AAA game that you didn't get a chance to play, like a Resident Evil 7 or something like that. They just announced the cloud version of that, whatever the heck that means. Pokey Clyde, do you have any podcasts that you listen to that you can suggest I listen to? My quick answer is always Radiolab. I think Radiolab has kind of fallen off for me a little bit because their episodes have gotten a little less focused. Granted, it's got to be really hard to keep a show like Radiolab going because Radiolab is about science, and you can only cover so many topics in science before you kind of run out. It's kind of like Mythbusters. Like, they got to a point where they're like, we're out of ideas, everybody. But yeah, obviously This American Life, The Moth is really good if you're a fan of storytelling. Yeah, those are like very old podcasts. I'm not good at like the new hip savvy podcasts. Amanda introduced me to a podcast the other day called By the Book, where two ladies take self-help books and try to use them to improve their lives and then report a week later on how it went. And I listened to that, and that was kind of fun. I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of the hosts themselves, but as far as just production value is concerned, my favorite is Radiolab for sure. Definitely want to give a shout out to NoClip. Danny O'Dwyer just started the official NoClip podcast. They did not have a podcast when he first started NoClip, but they just did the first episode, and it is much like the other stuff that they do, documentary in nature, so it is very different from the podcast that we do, and I think a lot of the podcasts that other people do. So go check that one out. And check out Red Dead Radio from Oh god, I'm so tired. Who puts Red Dead Radio together? Chat will tell me. Sorry. His name escapes me right now. Alexander Zirianov. Come on, I can get it. How about complimentary? Oh, yeah, duh. Sorry. There's also... Thank you very much. My wife does a podcast, Comp Pod. You can follow on Twitter, COMPPOD. The complimentary Jared Petty. Yeah, good old Jared. Yeah, he does a podcast called Chug That Coffee. Does a podcast about Red Dead that I'm gonna try to sneak on later this summer. And but my wife does it was a podcast called Complimentary the Podcast, where they talk about things, they complement things, they talk about things that are complementary, things that work well together, peanut butter and jelly and the like, and they talk about things that are complementary, meaning free. So fun things you can get that in life that are free, that are complementary. And it is themed around those three wonderful things. And if you thought, tired this early, yeah, well, I'm always tired early in the morning. If you think about positive podcasts, if you like Easy Allies because we are positive, you are not prepared for the positivity of the complimentary podcast. And I'm ashamed that that was not the first podcast that I brought up. The Hashtagonist has a podcast too, the Hashcast, which I have not been invited to. Alexander Zirianov, EZA Forum community has collectively picked the top 25 games of 2014. And here they are, you ready? Number 10, Danganronpa, Trigger Happy Havoc. Number 9, Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor. Number 8, Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. Number 7, Dark Souls 2. Number 6, Dragon Age Inquisition. Number 5, Bayonetta 2. Number 4, Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. Number 3, South Park The Stick of Truth. Number 2, Wolfenstein The New Order. Number 1, Shovel Knight. What are your thoughts about a retro game beating all modern ones? I think that makes sense because I think Shovel Knight is a crowd pleaser. I think a lot of these games, when you get into Smash Brothers and Bayonetta and South Park and Wolfenstein, I think those fit a very particular type of player, whereas I think Shovel Knight reminds me of like Journey or Inside, where it's something that, as I was saying before, is an easy recommendation to really anybody. Like, I think if you like games, you probably have some innate history or accessibility to the side-scrolling action platformer. Like, we've all run to the right and jumped and hit things. Bayonetta was robbed. We'll get to that, Austin. And so I think what Yacht Club Games did in recapturing the magic of old platformers like that, but still adding a modern flair to it, still doing things like, I love how the text rumbles when people talk and how it animates, and just the towns and the hub world and the overworld map and the story, which was so surprisingly emotionally gripping and had such a satisfying conclusion. So I think there's just a lot to love about that, and I think even if I was to tell you how great Wolfenstein is, you're like, yeah, it's just kind of too violent for me, and I'm not a big fan of shooters. Or like, yeah, South Park is fun, but I just don't like turn-based strategy games. Or like, yeah, Smash Brothers is fun, but I just don't like fighting games. And like, yeah, Bayonetta's great, but like the Devil May Cry style, I'm just not a big fan of that. Whereas Shovel Knight's a crowd pleaser. I think everybody, it's also cheap. It's also on every platform under the sun. And Shovel Knight has then, proceeded. The character has shown up in lots of other games, and so I think that game has gotten really good press since it first came out. And so, not surprised to see Shovel Knight on there. Super surprised to see South Park: The Stick of Truth beat Bayonetta 2. Wow. Surprising to see Dragon Age Inquisition beat Dark Souls 2. Rough. I have not played Bayonetta 2, but Bayonetta 2, from what I hear, is a near perfect game, and Stick of Truth is not. And so I'm surprised. I'm surprised after so many years, Stick of Truth, especially after the new the sequel just came out. What's it called? I don't remember. I'm not gonna fall into that trap right now. If I don't have to say the name of that sequel, I won't. But yeah, Bayonetta 2, number 5, harsh. And that's from somebody who hasn't played it, so. But yeah, retro game beating all the modern ones, feels good. Sean Mahoney, I know you talk a lot about stories, whether it's in a game or Fiasconauts or a film, but I wonder if you've ever enjoyed stories or even thought about stories of your own that are more grounded in reality. I often think about you watching Kyle play G-Force, Spy Gerbils, for Dumb Game Monday at GT, knowing that it's all over. There's something so tragic and also hilarious about it. I gotta go back and watch that someday. I'm kind of moving into the question I want to ask here, but do you see a story in these past 5 years? 5 years, but I don't know why you picked 5 years. Is it necessarily yours? I feel like I've lost the point here. Yeah, there's definitely a story. Some people have talked about you should write a book about just that transition, just going from game trailers into Easy Allies, and emotionally what that process. I don't know if everybody would want to read that book. I think maybe that would be more a series of blog posts more than anything. I think if I was to write a book, I would love to write a book about advertising. I'd love to write a book about first impressions and how to announce something. And just use examples of good announcements and bad announcements, and good announcements that then turn bad, or bad announcements that then they turn things around. Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn being like the most classic example of that, where you're like, whoa, there goes that game, and then, wow, they picked it back up. Final Fantasy, what is it? 12? What? 13? What? What was the versus 13 becoming 15? Whoa. Although, yeah, it's looking back now, of course, it makes sense that it's 15, but that still pissed me off when it happened. But yeah, there's definitely a story. I think one of the most things, the revealing aspects that I've tried to communicate was that 2014 was the worst year of my life. There's no question. So I think if you go back and look at anything we produced in 2014, and you really look deep into my eyes, you can see the pain and the frustration, and the lack of patience with me, basically knowing full well that I was going to lose my job or lose my company within days, weeks, months. Who knew? And just kind of going to work each week with that just looming over me, and I couldn't talk to anybody about it. I couldn't do anything about it, and so I'm like, hey, let me think of new fun ideas about what we could do, or maybe we can change things around. Maybe there's no point in doing that. But here we are today. So 2014 was a small price to pay for what we got at the end of the day. Sarah Wampler asks a very fascinating topic, but yeah, there is a story there, and I would likely tell you any stories that you would want to hear. Yeah, maybe if I retire from this biz one day, I'll write a book about that stuff. Sarah Wampler, who always asks not pointed, dangerous questions, but there's always a deep discussion coming from Sarah, and I appreciate that. Does Red Dead's place in this deeply flawed narrative, by the deeply flawed narrative, she means the Wild West, the discovery, the taming, the capturing, if you will, the spreading of American culture from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States, tarnish in any way your experience of the series? And as a related but separate question, do you think it should? So what Sarah gets into detail much more on the patreon.com/easyallies on, I believe this is from 1 week ago, might be 2 weeks ago. What she talks about is the sticky history of the Wild West. The Wild West is a fun place to be. It's fun to, riding horseback, pew pew, I'm a cowboy. I don't have to follow the law. I live by my own rules. And wasn't that a beautiful sunset? Yeehaw! There's a lot to love about the Old West. I recommend you watch The West from Mr. Ken Burns. I don't know if it is still up on Netflix, but Ken Burns did a fascinating documentary that I put off for a long time because it seemed, I'll be honest, it seemed kind of dull. But then I eventually watched that, and we all know that, hopefully you know, I think it's not a surprise that, the white man stole the United States of America from Native Americans, from people that were living here, from many different tribes who, unfortunately, not a lot of them come to my head because a lot of people, differentiate the Chumash from the Cherokee, from the Navajo, and knowing these different, just being like, Indians. They're like, well, they're very distinct, and they had very distinct histories and religious backgrounds and things that they believed in, and it is a unbelievably tragic story. The occupation of this country and the lies and the backstabbing that happened from the U.S. government as far as being like, hey, we're gonna move over there. Okay, now move over there. Okay, now move over there. Okay, now move over there. And like how many times that happened, how many promises that were made and broken, and not just broken financially, but like broken in the way that they were like, oh, we made a mistake. Well, let's just murder all those people. Like really, really horrible stuff. And a lot of that stuff is the backbone of kind of sits idly at the base of Red Dead Redemption. If you go back and play that original game, I think one way that Rockstar tried to be as respectful as possible is really painting the people that were speaking about Native Americans in a negative light as kind of being pseudo-intellectuals. Like they kind of gave off the appearance of being smart, but didn't actually do the hard work, the necessary research. You know, they were not the Kevin Costners of the world, where they were like actually living with these tribes and living in these communities and understanding what made them great and what made them unique and how special it was for a time that these people existed in this corner of the world. And these fascinating cultures that we will most likely never get back to. That I think there's so many lessons we could learn from them, especially with just consumption of resources. You know, I think the society that we live in is completely off base as far as what we are consuming and the way we are consuming it. As far as considering how much this is supposed to, how long these resources are supposed to last. I think on a grand scale, our society is just kind of like, the next generation will worry about it, and that was definitely not the Native American way. And so I think the Red Dead Redemption franchise has kind of put that at arm's length. I think they've kind of distanced themselves from that a little bit by being like, if we lean on that too much, we're gonna do it wrong. We're gonna be unfaithful to it. It's not gonna gel with the rest of this this kind of outlaw approach. I think that's maybe why they focused on Mexico a lot, because that was obviously a dissonance, a discord in between, you know, Spanish-speaking people and English-speaking people, and the difference in those cultures, even though it really was just a river that stood between, you know, those two places. But you cross that river, and it seems, you know, like you've crossed an ocean as far as like how different those cultures were at the time. And so, I think it does it tarnish? I don't think it tarnishes it, but I think you definitely. I think you can play Red Dead Redemption and not necessarily realize that. If you know that going into Red Dead Redemption, I think it's there, and I think it has an interesting commentary on it, but doesn't necessarily lean on it so much. But I'm curious, given that Red Dead Redemption 2 is going to be happening beforehand, and it looks like there's going to be some members of this posse, of this gang of Dutch's crew that are Native American or might have a past with the Native American community, if we get into that a little bit more. And how honest that will be. But again, I encourage you to read up on that stuff, because I know growing up, just being educated in Southern California, I was definitely aware of the price that was paid for us to have this wonderful country that we have, but didn't really know. I mean, just Google, just read the Wikipedia page for the Battle at Wounded Knee. Brutal. Really, really sad stuff. Tim Beshin, it's more of a request than a question, but could you please play Witcher 3 Blood and Wine and possibly stream it? I would watch the hell out of it, and I think a lot more people would. Yes, please. Tim, I won't make promises, but I will make this promise, that if I do play Blood and Wine, I will stream it. But I can't promise that I will play Blood and Wine, because I don't know. What's up, Uzi Suicide? Hey, everybody. I'm sure there were a lot of interesting comments and people weighing in on that, but we're almost at 2 hours, so let's wrap it up. Kern Grisdale, I'm curious about how you view trophies achievements, in particular 3 things. 1, should they be mentioned or discussed in reviews? I don't think it's necessary. Yeah, and a lot of times when we play stuff before a game is launched, like they don't work, because a lot of that stuff is multiplayer focused, or even they're changing that stuff, or even it's like spoilery. I always turn notifications off whenever I capture games. So if I'm like right in the middle of a great cutscene I want to use for review, you don't see like boop. So like a lot of times when I'm playing games, I miss out on those trophies, which is why I don't specifically mention them. And I don't think a score should be weighed down or amped up because of trophies necessarily. 2, does the Switch need them? I don't think it needs them. It'd be nice, but I don't think it needs them. And 3, which game do you think implements them best? I have never been a trophy hunter, so I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Best trophies achievements I have found, according to Kern, are in Mass Effect 1, where each trophy unlocks an in-game bonus for that player in the current and subsequent playthroughs. That's awesome. I love games with New Game Plus, so probably stuff that has New Game Plus and encourages you to play the game a couple times in order to get, or gives you the opportunity to go back and actually do that, so you don't have to like start a new save, so you can go do those special things. I'm trying to remember. Dragon Quest Builders has a great trophy system because it allows you at the end of a save for each chapter to go back into that chapter and run around and do anything that you possibly might have missed. So it's not like, oh, I got to start the game all over to get that one trophy. Ihiyovak. Ihi, I hope that's how you pronounce your name. I remember you told me, and it's escaping me now. I should have written that down I should have like a little pronunciation chart. I should write it down on this clipboard. Should have all the pronunciations right there. Choose a separate Star Wars game for each of the following updates. All right, here we go. An expansive mod that reworks the entire game. I mean, Jedi Outcast already has that. Knights of the Old Republic. An officially supported re-release on all current platforms would include working multiplayer. Jedi Outcast. An HD remaster on the level of Shadow of the Colossus. Shadows of the Empire. There you go. Brian Dauta, who helped me with that pronunciation. D-A-U-T-A, Dauta. Do you feel fighting games reviews are generally not that great? For as long as I can remember to present day, it seems like fighting game coverage and reviews almost always end up being kind of bland in comparison to other genres. No? You don't really go into more detail there, Brian, so I don't know specifically why you think that. I mean, by great, do you mean they don't cover the games as well? Because I think fighting games reviews are kind of like sports games reviews sometimes, where it really depends on what the reviewer was looking for. So a lot of times you might get a game that is very similar to the previous game, and so for the reviewer's perspective on what they like or don't like about previous entries, I think, has speaks volumes about what they were expecting out of this game. And I think it's also tough because fighting game reviews, so I'm looking at as many meanings as possible to your question. I think you could also mean maybe they're kind of boring. And I think one reason why fighting game reviews might be boring is because they're very technical. Like a lot of it is explaining modes. You can do this or this or this or this. The footage can potentially get repetitive because you're revisiting a lot of the arenas. Unless you have something like Injustice 2, there's really cool, really deep and expansive story behind it that you can throw in cool cutscenes, lots of great sound ups and stuff like that. A lot of times you're just kind of watching, the same type of footage over and over and over again, and it can be hard. I think I also noticed this with real-time strategy and MOBAs, where there's so much going on that if you are showing a specific detail, like if you're playing a any third-person game, exploration or shooter or puzzle game or adventure game, you can have that character kind of point at something, so you're like, and then when this happens in the review, you can be like, oh, that thing that the character is doing right now. Whereas if I'm looking at a MOBA and you're talking about character balance, I'm like, I just don't see it because I'm not that familiar with that genre, so I can't. It always cracked me up when I went to PAX one time and they were showing the League of Legends tournament, and the crowd would react to something, and I'd be like, something just happened. I don't see it because that's just on me. I'm not that familiar with the genres, and I think some people feel that way with fighting games. They're like, I'm not that familiar with the game, so I can't really see the connection between what you're describing and what is being shown. And sometimes it's tricky for an editor to know that as well. And so, yeah, I can see those where those are kind of tricky. But specifically to answer your question directly, I don't have the details for why you think they're generally not that great. Hopefully ours are always great. Bjornar Haraldsvik, with your Resident Evil 2 history, I really thought you had some sort of connection with Dino Crisis. Any other games you have a desire to play someday? I would love to replay Tactics someday. I mean, I'm gonna stick to PlayStation 1 titles because I believe Bjornar Haraldsvik got us the coasters, the PlayStation 1 coasters. You should see this because they're super cool. You should get these out and you should see them. But the original one he sent was Resident Evil, where he sent it actually is a game disc, but is a coaster. You can see the little things the coaster sits on. And then was kind enough to give me one, and he gave me Dino Crisis. And I commented when I pulled it out, I was like, oh, I got Dino Crisis, huh? And I'm like, I've actually never finished Dino Crisis. I've played it before, but I didn't finish it. But with the PlayStation, I've always wanted to do a replay. I never played Final Fantasy VIII. Final Fantasy VIII would be fun to play one day. And I never finished... I finished Tactics, but I would love to replay Tactics. I was super tempted when Final Fantasy Tactics came out on mobile. And I was like, oh yeah, on my phone. And I'm like, oh, it's too tiny. I can't do it. Tactics is weird when your hand is covering the screen. It's good to have like just a separate controller and be moving the characters around that way. What's a good Chrono Cross I never played. That would be a fun game to play. That came out on the PlayStation. Looking forward to checking out Spyro when those remasters come out. Because definitely did not play any Spyro game back in the day. That's a lie. I think I might have played the first one. Confused Hulk. I want so badly to have GTA 6 be in Chicago, but it brings up many issues. On the one hand, you have so many aspects of the city that are ripe for parody and representation. The Sears Tower, the Loop, Boys Town, South Side, Little Italy, Uptown, Andersonville, Wrigleyville, the city's propensity for home brewing, improv, and LGBTQ-friendly neighborhoods. You could have a fast travel system using the city's extensive public transportation. You could have the streets around Wrigleyville backed up during Cubs games. You've got the river and lakes and the suburbs for variety. To me, it's perfect for a GTA. However, I don't want to be running around a version of Chicago shooting whatever and whoever I please. For me, it would feel too real and sad. Do you think you'd also feel this way? If so, how could a Chicago GTA overcome this? Maybe set it in the past, Al Capone era? Or what if it doubled down on making you feel bad for committing crimes? I don't know if GTA will ever go as far as to say that it's going to make you feel bad for committing crimes. GTA always kind of has that interesting balance of excess. So I think they always try to play that up, that there's never a question that everything that you're seeing is a parody of all of this. That we are supposed to see ourselves at our most extreme because everything is amped up to its most extreme. You're not going to see any billboard in that game that's not raunchy in some way. But it is interesting, when I think one point where I got a little jolt of something being inappropriate when playing a GTA game is someone drove their car along the Venice Beach pier. Someone drove off the street and onto the boardwalk along Venice Beach and ran a bunch of people over. And you can do that in Grand Theft Auto 5. You can go to that exact spot and basically recreate that horrible event. And I remember the first time I came close to doing that in a playthrough, I was like, okay, too real. So I can sympathize with that. I think the main problem for me with Chicago would be, what's the story? Why are we in Chicago? I think, Los Angeles is a melting pot. And so that's why I think it was an interesting example to have these three different characters, to have somebody Michael, who clearly lives in Beverly Hills, basically. So somebody who's very affluent, somebody like Franklin, who is growing up in somewhere near a South Central, so you're getting Boys in the Hood vibes. And then you have Trevor, who's growing up north, so he's kind of more like trailer park, desert, driving his red Jeep out in the sandy dunes of Northern California. And or just the deserts outside of Los Angeles. And so I think that was an interesting blend of those types of personalities that were indicative of where they come from. And Chicago, be interested, in New York, you've got obviously the question of immigration comes up because Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty are kind of emblematic of that, and so you have this long history of people coming into the United States for the first time through New York, and so you have Nico, someone who is not born in the United States, coming to the United States through New York or Liberty City, and using that as an opportunity to find a new life. It is kind of the story of New York, and so I think a lot of those characters kind of represented what those cities were about. And so, yeah, I can't tell you what Chicago's about. I've only been there once. I think I've only been in downtown Chicago once. I think I drove through it one time, but I didn't get to spend a lot of time in Chicago. My brother's actually been to Chicago more than I have. He's done some theater there, and has lots of friends that live there. But I don't know. I think a Al Capone era Rockstar game, way down for. Loved L.A. Noire. Thought that was fascinating, and I would love to go back to that genre at some point. I would love to see Vice City next. I think doing something retro would be very fun for Rockstar to do. That would be my... You wouldn't get the internet anymore, which would suck. But I think that would be very fun. Andy Zolkeefly, do you have any plans to do something similar with other personalities, like a Batman conversation with Victor Lucas, video gaming with Jeff Keighley, or with the guys from The Know, that is a division of Rooster Teeth? Yeah, one thing that happened at Judges Week that was a first, that I can check that off my bucket list, I played a video game with Jeff Keighley. I sat down with Jeff Keighley, and the two of us co-opted a video game. I can't tell you which game. It's very exciting. It's going to be one of the fun E3 announcements. But now we know it's co-op, Jones. What could that game be? But that was a treat. Keighley's a tough guy to grab. Keighley's a tough guy. You can see me having one-on-one conversations with Keighley. I've been involved with his E3 coverage. I appeared on his YouTube show a couple times, and so we got to sit down and talk about stuff. So if you want, we had Keighley on GT Live back in the day. I believe he was our second guest. There are documented conversations that have been recorded of me talking to Keighley about stuff. Vic Lucas is a great call. I actually went to Disneyland on Sunday, and there was Vic Lucas. He walked by me. It was funny because I went there with our friends, and they have a 4-year-old kid who I just love the dickens out of, and he wanted me to hoist him on his shoulders. And so I put this kid on my shoulders, which is actually really great for my back, because it kind of like pushed my whole shoulders and back backward. I was like, oh, I kind of like this actually. This is like stretching me out in a good way, because I should be doing Cup of Jones like this the entire time. This is the way I should do Cup of Jones, but of course I'm like all hunched. And so I'm like walking through Fantasyland with this kid on my shoulders, and then there's Vic Lucas, and who also has children. We do not have children, so I'm like borrowing someone's child. And so I was like, hey, Vic Lucas, and I walked by him, and I'm sure he was probably like, hey, Jones, and then probably the first thing he said was like, I didn't know Jones had kids. So I'm like, look, I borrowed a child. You can rent them right when you walk into Disneyland. Didn't you know that? And so Vic is the best. I've been an Electric Playground fan forever, since before game trailers, and kudos to that guy. That's one of my favorite things about Judges Week, is seeing all of these people again, and it's always fun to connect with Vic. Very genuine, very smart, very good guy. But he's up there in Canada, so it'll be tough to get him up there and do a show with them. Yeah, if he's ever in town. That question did come up because we are so close to Judges Week stuff. Again, giving away our location. And so it's tantalizing when people are in town. We're like, ooh, can we get a Tim Geddes? Can we get an Andrea Renee? Can we get a Vic Lucas on our stage? And the answer at Judges Week is hell no, because there's just no time. Everybody is so beat. And then in the case of Vic, he's like, I'm gonna not do work over the weekend. I'm gonna go to Disneyland and stuff. And so, I did reach out to some people, and we kind of had preliminary conversations about like, are we gonna have some time? Can you come by the stage? And it just ended up not working out. So, yes, we have plans. We make plans, but those plans don't always happen. Alex Pisa, are you going to do more comic-based episodes? One thing that is apparent from the comic book conversation that I recently had, if you have not seen it, search Batman or Superman on our YouTube channel, and I sat down with Greg Miller and we talked about Batman and Superman, more Superman than Batman, because I wanted Greg Miller, because you hear me talk about Batman, extensively here on Cup of Jones, but I wanted to hear what he had to say about his one of his favorite comic book characters, and what is obvious from that video is I need to read more comics. And so no, until I read more comics. A lot of my comic knowledge comes from comic books I read in the 80s and 90s. And then as far as this century is concerned, I have a lot of catching up to do. I mostly read, I think Walking Dead was the last big comic I was invested in. And then I dipped out of it right around the time the show started, because it was just too much Walking Dead. And I had just read a lot of it, and it was just kind of exhausting to follow those characters. And so I just kind of moved on to other stuff. But I would love to go back and purchase big volumes of all of the Walking Dead comics I missed and get caught up. As well, apparently, X-Men Red, I think, is at the top of my list right now, because I love the X-Men, and Greg Miller said X-Men Red is very good. Safaki, 2 questions left. Safaki, with a couple of big hitters recently released on the big screen, what movies are you looking forward to in the coming year? I had to look them up, because I spend a lot of my time focusing on what games are coming out, and so I had to remind myself what movies are coming out this year, and so I made a list. Incredibles 2. These are movies I'm excited about. I'm excited about Ready Player One because I still haven't seen it. Mortal Engines, I think, looks crazy. It's the next Peter Jackson movie about like cities that are on tanks. So imagine if like London was a tank. just riding around the Earth, and like so you can have like cities, giant city structures that fight each other. And apparently it's based on a comic book or a graphic novel or something that I'm not familiar with, so it's going to be fun going into that movie without knowing the subject matter. Wreck-It Ralph 2, I think is fun. I had some issues with the first one, but the next one looks funny. Christopher Robin, I'm very curious about. We just got a trailer for Mowgli. Oof. If you've heard me talk about my issues with the Jungle Book film in the past, you would maybe take a guess at why I think the new Mowgli film has problems. Yeah, Christopher Robin looks interesting, though. I think the new Mission Impossible looks great. I've always been a sucker for those Mission Impossible movies. I can't say I'm, like, really, like, invested in them, but I'm a sucker for actors that come back, that continue a story, and so it's neat to see some of these characters return from previous Mission Impossibles. Very excited for Ant-Man and the Wasp. I'm definitely going to catch that out right when it comes out. And I'm excited for... there's a really amazing movie that is, the name is escaping me. I keep seeing it thrown at me on Twitter. Whenever I go through Twitter, everybody's recommending it. But, Sorry for Bothering You? Sorry to Bother You, or something like that, I think. It's about a African-American telemarketer that discovers that if he just talks like a white person, he'll get more business. And the crazy adventures that happen after he starts doing that. Maybe chat can help me with that comment. But, it's not Baloo's face, it's everybody's face. Solo is so soon. Solo's like next week, so yeah, I'm excited for Solo as well, but these are more down the road movies. Let's see if somebody can help me with that title. Okay. And I'm excited for a documentary called Won't You Be My Neighbor that is about Mr. Rogers and about his life. Sorry to Bother You. There it is. Sorry to Bother You. Yeah, that looks really great. Yeah, Solo as well, of course. Solo's fun. But it's just like, it's upon us. And Jason Wallstrom with the final question that I think is a fun thing to talk about. I'll give you a very quick version of because we are at 2 hours and 10 minutes. And that is, can you give us a story about your first ever E3? For those of you that don't know, E3 2002 was my first E3, and it was also the birth of Game Trailers. GameTrailers.com went live the morning of the first day of E3. So we were kind of tuned out to the whole press conference schedule. We didn't realize that there were the press conferences before the show, and so we were like, okay, the first day of the show, we're going to go in and get all those exclusive trailers, and then we were like, wait a minute, what are all these big events that are happening? I was very unaware of E3 before that year. Like, I think 1995 or 97, I think was the first E3. 1995, Alex. I think I'm going to take the question. What is 1995? As much I was into video games at the time, you know, reading GamePro and PC Gamer and EGM and all those magazines, every time they would mention E3, I guess it just like went in one ear and out the other. I was not aware that E3 was a thing, and was not aware that it was like right in my backyard because I grew up in Los Angeles, and so I didn't know until my friend Mike Buddy, who was one of the co-founders of Game Trailers, was like, we should go to E3. And I'm like, what? And so he got us in through a corporation that we created back in the day when we were making like short films and college projects and stuff like that. So we weren't Game Trailers, we were this different company. And we got in, and I stayed up all night, not just late, all night. So I went to E3 for the first time on no sleep, and put up a very bare bones, horrible looking version. If you can go to the Wayback Machine, or if you find people, just search like Game Trailers 2002 or like the original Game Trailers. Horrible website. But that was me. That was me, my web design capabilities in the year 2002. And then based on the success of that launch, we had my buddy Jeff Groats, who put some money toward a redesign, and then we came out with a second version of Game Trailers, which then evolved into what Game Trailers eventually became, and now it's just a YouTube channel. But we then took our new business cards. A friend of mine made shirts that were all too small for us, so I unfortunately didn't wear them to E3, and went to E3, handed out as many business cards as we could, got a bunch of B-roll on beta tapes and DVDs and thumb drives, and then took them all home, and then built the new website off of all of that fun content that we got. And that really doesn't happen anymore. That was one of the biggest changes from E3 then to now. Even when Game Trailers was still around, and that I would go from booth to booth, and that was kind of one of my main jobs, is like, hey, I'm here to get any B-roll that you guys might be giving out. They used to give that stuff out in person, and now they just send out emails and send out press kits, and we all get updated via email. So now when we go to a booth, we go there to demo a game. There's really no reason to do that unless you're greasing those palms and going to business meetings and stuff. Yeah, let's talk about Judges Week, shall we? Yeah. Judges Week. So we got 3 questions. I will read all of these questions before we talk about Judges Week very quickly. These episodes just get longer and longer because, Brandon K. Gann, because it will be 2 weeks before you read this, I'm sure you'll touch on Judges Week at the top, but more specifically, when you're chosen and invited, is it the invitation directly specifically to you or to Easy Allies and be decided on the group who is represented? And as a judge, do you play everything offered at Judges Week? I'm going to label these questions so I answer them. Or are you scheduled to play as much as you can? I remember the various aspects you touched on last year, like each day being themed and only one person per group going, so I was hoping for some final details to get a full picture of what Judges Week is from an outside fan's perspective. Adam Arcade asks, I know questions about specific games cannot be answered as an E3 judge. Are you given the privilege of seeing all games that will be present at E3? Even those that are unannounced until a certain E3 showcase? And somewhat related, do you see yourself being present for more showcase reaction streams this year, as opposed to your rare appearance during last year's EZA coverage? Yes. Last year I went to almost every press conference, and every night of E3 I went to as many parties as I could to try E3 out, try on a different pair of shoes for E3 and see how that felt. And some of those parties were really great. I thought were worth it. Some of those press conferences were definitely worth it, and I will be returning to this year. Some weren't. And so you will be seeing me more than you did last year, but not as much as 2 years ago. I will still be completely bowing out of some of the press conferences because I will be there, largely in part because stuff like EA Play has games that are there that I can only get my hands on there. Which means that if I wanted to play at a separate date, I would have to leave E3, go to EA Play, play the game, then leave EA Play and go back to the press conference. And so it fits to, when I'm there for the press conference, to play the game while I'm there and then, make the most of that time. And there's a couple other press conferences there. But I will be saying no to more things this year and showing up more on our streams. And James Vest asks, similar question, how does Judges Week work? Do they take you to a room with a ton of games? Do they take you from small room to room to play different games? Or do they have you all in one room and show each game one at a time? So, again, can't get into specifics, but I'll just generally answer these questions. When you're chosen as invited, is the invitation directed specifically to you? Yes. I am the primary judge of Easy Allies and the editor-in-chief, one of the managing directors of Easy Allies. And so I am the direct contact with the team that puts Judges Week together. Do you play everything offered? Oh, and some appointments are directed specifically to me, so some of them say we only want one representative from each outlet. Some of them let us change that. So in some cases, I was allowed to bring people with me, but as the primary judge, I feel responsible to play as much as I possibly can and to offer an opinion about it, whether that game is my type of game or not. And so some of the appointments last week, case in point, you saw the Kingdom Hearts event. Michael Damiani, Brad Ellis, and Ben Moore joined me and were able to talk about that as well, even though I also played Kingdom Hearts. But I was so exhausted. After we got back from that, I was like, you guys are fine. You're going to have enough to talk about with this game. You should just do that video. I don't necessarily need to sit in on it. But I did play Kingdom Hearts, and it was fun. And I haven't played a lot of Kingdom Hearts. I played 2, and that's the 2 and Chain of Memories on Game Boy Advance, the only 2 Kingdom Hearts games I played. So yeah, and so some people let me bring other people, some people don't. And when I am allowed to bring other people, I just throw up on Slack, hey, here are the appointments. Anybody interested? And so people can chime in and be like, yeah, I want to join you for that, or no, I don't. And so it is totally open up to the other allies to be a part of it, or to not be a part of it. Are you given the privilege of seeing all games that will be present at E3? No. Judges Week is a very specific set of games. So it is basically those people that decide to be at Judges Week. And obviously there is value there in going and not going. If you don't go, you save money. It is a very limited, there's only 4 days of Judges Week, so there's only a very limited amount of time, which we can play so many games over the course of 4 days. But at the same time, it is advantageous for people to do Judges Week because they get you hearing about that stuff now. So we will get more information about Kingdom Hearts at E3, hopefully a release date, which they seem to be teasing. But at the same time, you got to see gameplay from the Toy Story map. You got to hear us finally playing the Hercules section from Mount Olympus and talking about that. And so you get a little bit of news. Days Gone, the embargo's lifted, Dreams, and there's more embargoes that will be lifting before E3. So you kind of get the hype building, and you get that information out before E3, so it's not just 800 people all trying to tell you their own separate stories all on the same day. And so that's why all press conferences don't happen at the same time. There's kind of like a shuffle about who's going to be when and on what day. So yeah, it is not every game. It is just people that decide to be there. And somewhat related, do you see... Oh, sorry, yeah. And do they take you to a room with a ton of games? Do you go from small room to play different games? So yeah, how it works is you have these different companies that basically get different spaces. So you'll go to one hotel to check out one event, and then we'll get in a shuttle, and then they'll take us to another hotel to check out another event. Some of these events will only have one game. So even though it wasn't officially a part of Judges Week, we went to the Black Ops 4 reveal. The judges were shuttled there and did have a specific time that we were designated to play Black Ops 4. And so again, that wasn't a Judges Week event, but it was like when we got the Judges Week schedule, the schedule make sure we had time to go check that out. And that was one of the last events. Same thing with Kingdom Hearts. People that weren't judges went to the Kingdom Hearts event, but all judges were permitted to go and were given access to that event. And so some of the events are just one game. Some of the events you'll play a lot of games. I think one of them had like 7 games, and so you either move from station to station to check those out, or all of those games will be loaded on one console, and it's kind of up to you what you want to play. I think out of all the games that were available, there was only one game I missed, and it was just in the nature of time. And there was a similar game to it, and so I played one game. It's kind of like 2 games, same flavor, and so I played one version of it, and I didn't get a chance to play the other one because in the amount of time I only had like 15 minutes to play each game. So it's like tough to be like, have I played as much of this as necessary to get an opinion of it? So yeah, for all of you that are aspiring game journalists or game journalists yourselves, or follow coverage a lot, and you hear stories of us going to these preview events and playing games. Some are in town, some are out of town. Sometimes people pay us to go to, or not pay us, but pay for our cab from the airport, pay for air travel, pay for lodging if necessary. It is basically just like that, but a bunch of them in a row. So if you imagine, like, if everyone tried to have a preview event all in one week, all around the same neighborhood, then yeah, that's what that is like. And they're all a different vibe. One vibe that is very unique is an event called the Independent Evening, where a bunch of indie games get their chance to all kind of be played at the same time, and they'll have an open bar, and it'll be catered, and so it's just really great to just like drink a beer and talk to a developer about their game that people are playing for the first time ever. I loved at the Independent Evening hearing devs talk to each other. So hearing 2 devs that are just meeting for the first time and seeing each other's games for the first time and sharing stories and difficulties about development and stuff like that. It's really fun being a fly on the wall and picking all that stuff up. So there you go. There's a really brief editorial about Judges Week and all the stuff that goes into that. Our big takeaways from our Cup of Jones this week: change the $1 tier description. Shoot the podcast in VR, which I love. Hopefully we'll get to that one day. That would be very fun. Or just don't even shoot the podcast in VR. Just in general, shoot our new space in VR. Might be fun if we get the studio. Last week in Easy... make a video that is like Easy Allies clips, but for our shows that we do, where... I will tell you right now, we will never do that until we get more employees. Until we have somebody that maybe comes by our studio a couple days a week and helps us edit stuff, so we can have someone else take on that responsibility. Because that is a big enough show that if someone was to do that, we would have to get rid of another show. And we like the shows that we produce right now, and we're going to continue to produce them. So there you go. That was the Cup of Jones. I got a little treat for you at the end of Cup of Jones. If you made it all the way through, if you watched 2 hours and 22 minutes of Cup of Jones today, thank you so much to all of you for hanging out. This last week's Easy Allies podcast, I was not on, and it sucks. I hate it whenever I won the bet, which is great, but spoilers, sorry. I was not there to celebrate winning the bet. That was a really good win because the bet was Kyle was going to search Amazon and how many links until he got to a link about women, about Amazons. And I was like, no, there's no way. Hundreds. You know, it's all gonna be Amazon.com. Every single one of those links. I knew it. I knew it in my bones. And I got that right. And I was very happy about that. That was probably one of my most proudest bet wins because I was so confident I was right. But I unfortunately was not there for that. But one of the simple joys of not being around for the podcast is when I cut the podcast, I get to watch it for the first time. And that rarely happens, that I get to watch the Easy Allies podcast or listen to the Easy Allies podcast and have no idea what's about to happen, have no idea what the love and respect questions are, when podcast halftime's going to start, what the topics of discussion are going to be. And so it was very enjoyable to cut last week's podcast. And even more enjoyable was the fact that there was a false start to the podcast last week. They started the podcast and Kyle goofed. I've gotten Kyle's permission to show you said goof. And so we will watch. Thank you. Yes, I'm very excited for the new Paper Mary Poppins. Thanks very much. Hopefully we'll get into that later tonight on the Easy Allies podcast. I love that. I love when I get called out on the podcast for some opinion that I have that apparently does not sit well with the other allies. So if you want a tiny version of my Mary Poppins rant, tune in tomorrow, the Easy Allies podcast. Yeah, a podcast false start you rarely get. So as we wrap up this episode of Cup of Jones, I hope you enjoy this fun little outtake from the Easy Allies podcast. Thank you so much for everybody for watching. Thank you for watching the last 2 weeks and for not just drowning me with questions. This was a longer episode, but so hopefully we won't have as many questions next week. But considering there were 2 questions, all of you were very reserved and not asking like double questions. I don't think I got any double questions. So you were all on your best behavior, and I appreciate you do your work, I do our work. Together we make this Cup of Jones things happen. Yeah. One more day, and then I'm going to rip this garage open and tear everything out and plug it all back in. And so a thank you also to people who helped us get that equipment. And I hope you enjoy next week's Cup of Jones. And it might not change drastically because I don't put a ton of production effort into Cup of Jones because I want it to be very, just very calm, you know, just like a calm investors meeting. I don't want to jazz this up too much. It's kind of behind the scenes. Undeniably, there will be some differences with Cup of Jones next week. The other shows, am I mad about the foot on the table? Nay. That was his mission. That was his objective for this week. So Ian did it. Ian put his foot on the table if you haven't seen that episode, if you want to go check it out. So yeah, enjoy this fun outtake. And I will see you all very soon tonight, 6 p.m. We're streaming something, I don't know. And I will see you all for a brand new Cup of Jones next week. Take care. Cheers.
Hello, everyone. This is the Easy Allies podcast. I'm your moderator, Kyle Bossman, and joining us this week, Daniel Bloodworth.
Hello.
Michael Huber.
I don't know why, but I looked directly into those lights.
And Ian Hink.
We've got some new lights. They don't have diffusion, so we'll see how it looks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
real
to
bright.
listeners, we're a little brighter.
Don't look up.
Much brighter.
Hopefully.
And this isn't even the end of the new lights.
No, we've got 2 real lights coming in soon.
This week's objective comes to us from... I lost it. I lost the person who wrote that. We're gonna have to redo the intro. Sorry, John.
I was loving that.
Yeah, it was really cool.
I thought that was a great episode so far.
Yeah. One of the best.
I think we should keep it.
No, I mean we can't now.
Yeah.
I gotta find that person's name. Dang.